first order of business is the invocation to be read by Supervisor Spoonhour.
Please stand if you're able. Dear Heavenly God, we are just grateful to be here in your presence today, Lord. We just thank you for what you're doing in this county and through us, Lord. We thank you that you have a plan for us, God, that you know exactly how things are going to go. We just ask you for your wisdom as we deliberate on things today, God. Help us to be good stewards of what you've given us. Lord, I pray for our troops and all those first responders. God, we thank you for these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right. Pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Spoonhour. Okay. So the next item of business is the chair's comments. I want to remind everyone of our joint town hall meetings coming up between the Board of Supervisors and School Board in each of our districts. They are all in March. District 1 is Wednesday, March the 11th at 7 at the Fife Fire Station. Districts 2 and 3 are combined Monday, March 16th, 7 p.m. at Central High School. And districts 4 and 5 are combined on Thursday, March 26th at the Virginia Farm Bureau. So that is all my comments. So the first item of new business is the presentation of the County Administrator's Fiscal Year 2021 Proposed Budget. Mr. Podeski, you're on. Here we go again.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you your fiscal year 21 proposed budget. I do want to start just by thanking a large number of folks. To bring this budget to you here today, it's taken months of work to be able to present a format for you for your consideration throughout all the departments, the constitutional officers, our partners at the school system, the support agencies that also provide support to our overall operations. It's taken a lot of work, and I'd like to thank Barbara Horlacher and her team for helping us get here today. But it really is a team effort. So what I'm presenting you today is just an introduction. Today's considered the county administrator's proposed budget. And it is just that. It is my introduction to the board that's based on general guidance that I've received from the board, what we hear from our communities as our priorities, and trying to present you a budget in context in a balanced format and fashion. For the benefit of some of our newer members here, just to spend a little bit of time before I dive too deep into the budget, we will have multiple sessions here, all public, to maintain transparency. They'll be recorded and presented in this room. The only exception to that is our town hall meetings, where the public will have an opportunity to come and engage with us in that format. But all of our budget sessions are in this room and will be recorded for public consumption and engagement in the process. I can assure you this is not the only way you're going to hear feedback on the budget. You will get calls and emails and personal visits to share perspectives, and that is an extremely important part of the budget development process. For us, listening and learning is critical to be able to bring a budget that we think, to the best of our ability in a balanced way, addresses the priorities of our community. This is done in a very fair balance. To be able to present to you everything that you'll hear today, we have to look at all factors. And so as I'm working with the team in the county, we look across all sectors of needs, but we do it in a context of understanding of our community. We understand certain individuals have lesser means in our community than others. So we take the tax burden and fees and such that we place on our residents extremely serious. And so that is sort of our guiding conscience to our budget process as we look at the guidance the board has provided in bringing you this budget here that you will have today. Throughout these sessions, you will notice that today you'll have the opportunity to hear from our sheriff, our fire chief, animal protection, and human resources. Those presentations will follow my presentation here today. Following that, you will also have a request from Ms. Horlacher on setting certain rates and fee schedules and those kinds of things. Just to let you know, as you set those rates by code, you are only allowed to bring them down. And so the guidance that we've received from the board to date is to bring at least the tax rates in flat. So spoiler alert, there is not a tax increase proposed in this budget. So you will not see that in here. So as we advertise, you will see everything is being recommended at flat. There are a few fees that we'll go over, but Ms. Horlacher is going to end with that here today. And so as you have questions for those departments or myself, my presentation is very high level. I'm going to attempt to talk to you about the revenues and expenditures and priorities in my overview. You'll be able to talk to the departments about their specific operational requests. As with any budget, there are needs and requests that we are not able to accommodate in my recommendation, but they're here to make sure you understand not only what they can accomplish with the proposed budget, but what their challenges were that may have been unfunded. Certainly, there's opportunities. I know some of you may have had the opportunity to absorb all 442 pages over the weekend. That's not an expectation. It is an ongoing process for us, but certainly as you have comments and thoughts, please get them to us. Our job is here to address the board's concerns appropriately and get that feedback to you so you can make an informed decision before you vote on the budget in April. That being said, if for some reason you miss a question today for the sheriff or fire chief or whomever, we will get those answers for you. We will be tracking every outstanding issue that comes up as a concern to make sure that we close those concerns before we adopt the budget. And so you'll have those opportunities in the weeks and months to follow. We'll also touch base in 2x2 processes, but we'll also need to remember that this is a learning process. So not only is it us educating on the budget and my recommendation, it's us hearing from our residents at our town hall meetings, our public comment times, public hearings that will occur early April as well, to make sure that we're adopting the best possible budget that we can on behalf of our citizens. So as I move into the budget process here, I always tell folks that I think one of the most important things we do on behalf of our citizens is adopt a budget that meets our citizens' needs. The trust that our citizens put in us to manage their funds is paramount to us being able to be successful on their behalf. And I hope what we have here today meets yours and our community's priorities. Do want to note that the full presentation that you will have here is available on the web. It's important to note that we will go through the budget process. The county administrator's proposed is what's up now. Once this board adopts, any changes that we identify, so if we missed a spreadsheet or something needs identified or we change some priorities, at the end of this process, when the board adopts in April, you will have adopted the board's adopted budget. At that point, we will put up what was finally adopted for the citizens to see. So there's certainly opportunity for improvements to what we have introduced here, but for working purposes over the next few months, the budget is the county administrator's recommended. Today we're going to talk a little bit about that budget process. I'll spend a little more time on that. Talk about some of the economy and what we're seeing in the Goochland economy, our recommendations on our operating and capital. I should note that while we will identify some of the high-level capital and some of the projects identified in some of our priority areas, we will have a full session back on capital again in March. So that'll be part of that. You'll see those weaved into different budget, operational budgets, but then another full session on capital. The strategic goals and priorities, you will see those in context. Utilities, we operate as an enterprise fund. We always focus on utilities slightly different than we do on our general fund operations and the rest of the county government. Not unlike anyone's home budget, we have future challenges and areas that we are not able to accomplish in our recommendation. And then we will talk about the next steps, and those will be those meetings that I outlined earlier. So let's talk a little bit about this. I said earlier that we listen, and I think that's probably the most important part of any process that we do here at the county, the budget not being an exception. Understanding that we have residents with challenges, meeting their day-to-day needs. Raising taxes on a citizenry is an important challenge that we have to look at annually. Can we deliver their service needs in the context of the revenues that we have? And the budget we're presenting to you today, we believe, does that in large part. In October, we formally kick off our budget process internally. So every department is notified and provided a framework in which they present their upcoming year's needs and 5-year staffing priorities. In November, Barbara and I spend quite a bit of quality time with each and every county department and constitutional officers and our school partners and the support services requests in order to get here with you today. As you know, we met with the schools as it relates to the CIP, and our CIP, as you're aware, is a 25-year CIP. We focus on the 5-year from a balance standpoint, and we focus on the 1-year from a funding standpoint. So we'll spend a little bit more time on that here. Ongoing, we meet with the board to make sure we believe we've tried to capture your priorities in here. We still are following the adopted strategic plan of the board, as we do with all of our priorities. As this board knows, we will revisit that here, hopefully in the spring, and future budgets will be guided by the next adopted strategic plan. Always get the question about budgets and revenues, especially when we've had some good years of surplus at the end. I think this board and community knows that the part of the way that we fund our ongoing capital improvement plan with cash is in part based on conservative budgeting and on our expenditure savings. This budget is no different. We still plan quite conservatively on our revenues, even though you will see both budget to actual for prior years, but that is a practice that we have maintained. When possible, we seek efficiencies and cost savings. It's important to know, though, we sustained all service levels in this budget. So we have been running many of them efficiently already, so that it's a lot more difficult to identify some of the cost diversions or cost savings, but we looked at that where possible. This budget, outside of public education, you will see is one of our largest investments in public safety from a staffing standpoint that we've been able to recommend to the board in quite some time. And this budget is aligned with your priority area on public safety. Obviously, we balance everything where we meet or exceed all of our financial policies and requirements, and you'll see some of that as we move through here. Goal 5 of your board strategic plan is about our employees, and this plan does look at maintaining competitive wages. There are a number of positions, and we'll spend some time, not only today, but throughout our budget presentations, talking to you about where we were able to recommend some positions, but also help you appreciate the ones that we were unable to fund and those implications. You will see in this budget, we continue to reduce our dependency on prior year fund balance. Over the past few years, we were north of $2 million on dependency on prior year fund balance. We are narrowing that down, and within the next 2 years, we will become non-dependent at all on prior year. And so we've been able to continue that as we move forward. Utilities, our utility model as an enterprise fund does self-sustain through its user rates, and everything we have based on utilities, based on our rate studies. And this budget will expand convenience center hours, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here. So let me just pause and talk a little bit about the economy, because I think all of us know that we've been in a pretty good upswing for a while. And one of the pieces that I mentioned earlier is we do frame this from a conservative aspect. So what's that mean as we look forward? And so for our perspective, we also don't want to put ourselves in a position where we have a major downturn in revenues and where we have to make major service reductions and those kinds of things, but we do track the economy. And so what's it looking like for Goochland? And there are some factors here that I do want to point out. I'm showing you sort of the highlights, the really good things about our Goochland economy. That doesn't mean everyone in our residency enjoys high median incomes and high home values. And so please know that I do take those concerns in balance here. But as you can see here, and you just heard from the assessor at your last meeting, we continue to see strong commercial capital investment in our county. You'll see how that plays out in our Tuckahoe Creek Service District in this presentation. From a percentage of job growth, we continue to be one of the top job producers in the region. This chart, some of you probably are scratching your heads because I did. So why would some of these look like they're regression? First of all, it's last quarter. And so that's from a percentage basis of new job creation, that's where you're seeing some of this come up. But based on the Virginia Chamber, we continue to be percentage-wise one of the leaders in job creation in the Commonwealth. overall, and again, it's percentage basis. Unemployment rate, we continue to have extremely low unemployment. That does not mean that there's underemployment as well in our community, but from a pure apples-to-apples statistical standpoint, we are one of the lowest unemployment. From a median income standpoint, we are one of the highest in the Commonwealth. And again, not everyone in our community meets that median family income, but statistically, that is where Goochland stands. You saw this chart a couple weeks ago, our assessed valuation. We continue to work to support commercial investments to reduce the dependency on our residential tax base in the appropriate areas identified in our comp plan. And so this is exactly what you had seen a couple weeks ago from Mary Ann. Median housing values. I should point out to you that this chart you've seen this chart before. This is based on the 2017 numbers from the census data. They'll be updated again here in the upcoming census. We were high in this chart, as you can see. We had the highest median home value in 17. Just to give you a little bit more perspective, though, in 2019 alone, the median home sales price was $458,000. And so if you have a home and you're looking to sell, you probably have good value in your homes. But for those that are home challenged or $458,000 is not a practicality for them, that statistic probably doesn't sit so well. And so we do look at both sides of that equation, but we do have, not only in the region on median home values, but last year we led the region on median home sales values as well. Building permits have continued to be up. As you would expect, it's consistent with the projects that we've had approved. So I'm going to shift a little bit into the budget. And so I gave you some good news. Please know that that is always balanced with the challenges that our residents face in the community. But when I go into the budget, some folks get confused on this, so I just wanted to take an opportunity to spend a little bit of time. You'll hear us talk about the all funds collective budget, and that's what it means. It's all of our funds that we get, including our state and federal and grant sources and those kinds of things, that we build our overall budget on, which you can see here is projected at $92.9 million. You can see most of the funding in the overall fund budget relates to the board's priorities. As you would imagine, education and public safety are our top two. Public utilities looks like a larger chunk on here, but they're not in our general fund, and I'm going to switch to that here in a minute. But our funding is generally aligned with the board's priorities and your strategic plan. As I said earlier, there is no tax rate increase proposed in this introduced county administrator budget. We plan to maintain the 53 cent per 100 tax rate. We have been positioned well, almost 20 cents, 19 cents below Louisa and far below the rest of the region with our tax rate. This budget does propose, and consistent with the board's direction, to maintain that tax rate at 53 cents. I will point out later in the presentation that that's part of the equation. For those that live in the Tuckahoe Creek Service District, the equation looks a little bit different, but those that are not in the district, this is their tax reality from a real estate basis. Let me switch to the general fund. So the general fund there is just shy of 60 million, 59.8. This is, and you can see from this chart, this is primarily the local funding sources that make up what we count in the general fund equation. Other property taxes, that's more your personal property and other kinds of taxes. We are, like many counties, real property tax dependent. That's usually what drives most counties throughout the Commonwealth. There are some exceptions to that where folks are a little more dependent on sales tax and those kinds of things, but real property is really the driver for most counties in the Commonwealth. And you can see some of the other revenue sources here. The capital improvement plan, this is the overall capital improvement plan, the 25-year plan. It's about $630 million in 25 years. I've shared this before, and I think this board's very well aware, most counties do not do more than a 5-year capital improvement plan. And I only know of one other county doing a 10-year. There are others that, since we've introduced our 25, have seen the value and are going to emulate it. But I will say, for us, this tool serves us pretty well. Not only do we balance the 5-year and budget the upcoming fiscal year, it really does give us sort of a look forward on both the government side, the school side, to what are our longer-term needs and what do we see coming down the pike that are going to be needs for our community. Often there's more needs in a 5-year plan than you can truly budget based on cash and debt capacity. This plan really, after 5 years, while it's not balanced, it at least identifies those needs so we can consider them in plan. And every year that we adopt a new budget, we relook at a new 5-year that brings that out year into that perspective. And so we will spend more time on this. Nothing, by the way, nothing has changed in the CIP fundamentally outside of some transportation, and we'll talk to you more about that since we introduced it to you at the January meeting with the school board. So everything else is generally consistent with what you had seen there. Transportation, even though some things may have moved, it was more in priority order, and a lot of that is state and federal funding dependent. So we'll spend more time on that as we move into this, but none of the other general projects have changed. In the 21 just 21 that we'll be adopting as part of this, there's $5.8 million committed to these particular functional areas. We'll get into more of the detail of what is that 42% for education and the 32% for fire and rescue in my presentation here. But a lot of what you're seeing in the upcoming year, with some exceptions that I'll share with you, is major ongoing maintenance and repair kinds of things. There are not a lot of large new facility kinds of things. Those are in the out years of the plan, but not in the 21. And I'll share with you some of the major apparatus and fire and rescue here in just a moment. So let's talk about some of these goal areas, and we'll talk about the board's strategic goal areas. The board currently has maintained that we want an effective and transparent government with an emphasis on customer service. Much of what our overall budget that supports our ongoing operation supports this. What I'm going to highlight here is just some of the things that our residents would see as a change in the upcoming year. We have continued to budget ongoing renovations throughout this campus. Before the end of this fiscal year, we hope to open the registrar's office. We will have hopefully bid out the commissioner revenue and treasurer's space. That's the full far wing of the building, and continue to make those spaces much more customer focused, much more interactive amongst one another's, and so they will have a definite customer service emphasis in the design, as well as being much more operational to the longer term needs of those departments. This budget does increase Wednesday coverage and Sunday coverage at both convenience centers. And so there will be parity in operational hours at the convenience centers, and this budget includes those. You'll hear more about that in the general services budget. Another project that's actually funded but will be rolled out in the upcoming year will be our building inspection software. We're really excited about this. This actually offers our customers, as we think about how our customers are interacting with their government, while we love to see everybody, many folks just want to get on their computer and do what they need to do remotely. And so our permitting processes will be streamlined. There'll be opportunities for online permitting processes. You can schedule and look at status of permits, all those kinds of things online. Our inspectors in the fields will actually have more functional opportunity, and the systems will interact with other county systems even better. So we're excited about that opportunity for those residents and businesses that engage in our community development building side of our operations. There are some fee changes. Each year we look at different fees throughout the county. A number of these are, all of these in fact, are in the building official's office that we'll get into more detail when they get into the community development presentation. Just a couple of these fees we're hoping we never have to collect. And so the budget's not based on us increasing revenue from many of these. Some of these we're hoping are cost divergent, especially the last one, working without a permit fee. We hope no one has to ever get this fee, but it happens. We hope when folks want temporary certificate of occupancies, it's an additional work effort to get out and do those. And so there's some fees there, and just building code modifications that's asking us to actually go through the physical process of modifying our building code, and vacation of plat. So they'll get into those in a little bit more detail with you. These are the only fee changes that we have proposed in the upcoming budget, so that you'll have an opportunity to focus on those in the weeks to come. We always talk about the balance in our community of protecting our rural areas that we value so much, And this budget continues to support our land use program to do just that. I think most of us in this room know that over 50% of the actual land in Goochland County participates in our land use program. That equates to about a $3.2 million benefit to, yes, it's to those property owners of revenue that we would otherwise collect and be able to use for service, but it fundamentally supports our keen interest in protecting rural lands. And it has done that for justified agricultural purposes. I think this board knows that in the past several years, we've gone back to a revitalization process for that annually, and have had great success with that and good participation from our residents. And this plan continues to support that benefit. The capital investment, and we'll talk a little bit more about the schools here, but primarily you're going to see a large portion of the upcoming capital investment in our 5-year plan targeted at Goochland Public Schools. While the county plan looks bigger there, a lot of that is federal and state monies for road transportation projects that may or may not come to fruition in the 5-year plan. And we'll talk a little bit more about the county's priorities in the 5-year plans as we come up here shortly. Excellence in financial management. I think this we've done a pretty good job with it, and we don't, pat ourselves on the back too much, but this budget and our processes, as I said earlier, the trust in managing people's tax dollars is something that we take to heart and try to do to the best of our abilities. And to do that, we've done a number of things. We've undertaken processes to make sure all of our policies meet or exceed best practices in the industries. We have received 2 AAA bond ratings as a reflection of not only our financial excellence, but our credit worthiness as well. We're undertaking a number of things as it relates to our financial software. I think most of you know that we just rolled off on July 1 to a new financial system. That has gone extremely well, but it's been a real commitment from our agency partners, school partners, and the county to pull that off. I'm really proud of the team for doing that. We didn't take too much of a breath. We rolled right into the human resources modules and payroll modules. As early as this morning, they were sitting in training for that. And that's planned to go live here come July 1. And we're working with our treasurer and commissioner on the next phase that we hope to start shortly after the new fiscal year on the Commissioner of Revenue and Treasurer's modules. And so we continue to update those systems that have served us for almost 30 years. And so these have been a major undertaking. I'm real proud of the team for their efforts here. It's going to have a real end benefit to the citizens on how we interact and the data we can produce and process. As you can see, we continue to meet some of our policies that the board has set for us, that the Finance and Audit Committee reviews. We're well in line with all of our policies that we've set for us as a board. One of the things that I always get asked, and it usually happens at a town hall meeting, is, okay, the budget's balanced and you've hit some of the priorities that I see as a resident, but what do you do if the sky falls tomorrow and you don't have, I'm not seeing in your budget any rainy day funds, if you will. We don't necessarily call them that. You'll see revenue stabilization, you'll see assigned and unassigned balances. We have a substantial amount of money that we have either committed or uncommitted in our unassigned or in our assigned, which are assigned capital projects that if something would happen, we could unassign those funds and we'd have those to access. We're in a pretty strong fund balance position as a county, as you can see, and they meet and exceed all of our policies. This gives you a little bit more perspective graphically where we are at with our debt compliance. We are far below this. It is fair to say that we will revisit this as we go to borrow for some of the projects that we're talking about in here. But right now, where we are at today and with planned roll-off, you can see where we're at with our debt policy compliance. So moving into strategic goal 4, this probably is where you're going to see the bulk of the investment in the introduced budget that I've presented to you here today. Public education, being one of our top priorities, is going to see a 4.1% funding increase. That recommendation's about a $950 increase, $50,000 increase over current operating year budget. And with other funds, the schools will see about a $1.2 million overall increase. With all funds, it's about a 3.6 for the schools. Their 25-year plan is about $211 million. Our focus really, though, is what we're going to do in the next 5 years. You'll see $39.4 million for New Goochland Elementary School, and I just want to clarify, that is the school project number and the road and parking lot improvements combined. And so if you look at the CIP, you'll say, well, I see 37 or 36 here and then 3+ here. We've added both of those projects in this recommendation for you. Quite honestly, they need to sustain each other for the elementary school project to work well on Bulldog Way. And as I said earlier, there are improvements to facilities, and Dr. Rayleigh will be here at your first meeting in March to talk to you further about the school's priorities. In that 4.1 funding increase, they are able to address some salary related issues, positions and those kinds of things. I'll let Dr. Rayleigh get into that much further with you. But we work very closely with our schools on both their operational and capital requests. You can see some of where that 2.4 million is going in the next year. We always have an annual bus replacement schedule with the schools. But you can see we've started to cash fund towards the Goochland Elementary. There's general improvements to the middle and high, and then Randolph Elementary. Dr. Rayleigh will get into those with you in a little bit more detail. Public safety on the general government side is by far the largest investment that we are proposing in this budget, and I'll go into more detail with you. The 25-year plan has about $1.2 million of capital investment in public safety arenas, and you'll see what we're proposing in the next few years here. All of this information is shared with you in your binder. I will say, for those that pull up the online version, the capital improvement plan page by page details each of the projects in the capital improvement plan and when we're proposing it. The spreadsheets that we've used with the board, while it's a lot of information, sometimes you can glean all the projects a little quicker in the larger spreadsheets, and so that may be of help. And we will go back over those in this process as well. So let me talk about where some of these priorities are being funded. We have recommended in this budget to add 4 additional deputy positions to the sheriff's office, 1 new dispatcher for the 911 center, and we're pleased to share that we are proposing increasing the programming side of the sheriff's department by adding the Operation Lifesaver program. Those of you that are not as familiar with that, Operation Lifesaver is primarily a program for individuals in our community that have cognitive disorders, some of which that may cause some wandering types of behaviors. This program actually would sort of give a GPS indicator. We believe just the search time involved potentially with one of our residents would pay for this program. And in fact, we've had to do that in years past. And so we're pleased to be able to support the Sheriff's Office request of Operation Lifesaver in this program. I will point out, and you will see Sheriff Creasy's here with you today. He'll be able to talk to you about some of the requests. You will see that he requested 6 additional deputy positions, 2 of which were sergeants. One of the things that we were able to work with him is looking at what can we do to upgrade existing positions without adding an actual full-time FTEs. And so he can speak to that in more detail here, but we tried to support to the best of our ability as many positions as we could for the Sheriff's Department. These will increase coverage throughout the county, potentially reduce response time, add response to responder incidences for the Sheriff's Department throughout the county, throughout the work weeks. We continue to support the vehicle replacement programs and the training that we've supported for the Sheriff's Office in prior budget requests. Sheriff Creasy will get much more into this, but we're pleased to be able to support as many of his requests. I do want to thank the Sheriff's Office. I know Sheriff Creasy's been on the job for just around 45 days, give or take a few. They've really jumped in well and have been good partners in this budget process, and there are many things that we've already talked about that as we move forward we'll work together on, and I appreciate not only Sheriff Creasy's professionalism but the team he's built around him as we move forward in this budget process. We continue, and before I leave the Sheriff's Department, I should note that one of the things you will see in your plan is just like we did for fire and rescue, we're working with the Sheriff's Office to identify an ongoing staffing plan. So as we look at future years and goals that the Sheriff's Office is trying to accomplish, we've looked at that over the next 5 years, just as we are and have been in fire and rescue. And so the fire and rescue plan side of strategic goal continues to add fire and rescue professionals. to our professional system. As you know, we have a combined system here that's dependent on volunteers and our professional staff. We take great pride in that. And at the same time, we're looking at both ways to make sure that we have full-time professionals that can respond when those 911 calls come in, increasing the number of personnel per shift to be able to deliver different functions for our community. Right now, as you know, in October, we hit the staffing goal of 2 per station 24/7. That assumes no one calls in sick. That assumes that everyone's here on staff, on shift, all the time. So as we add additional positions, that allows us to cover some of those vacancies and make sure those stations are staffed 24/7. It also allows us to start adding additional staff and additional stations. So when you can move up from 2 to 3, you can start taking additional apparatus out of the bays that we can't with only a minimum of 2 staffing. And so we start that process in this year's budget request, and you'll see Chief Ferguson's going to be here. He'll be able to talk to you about that. What I do want to make sure that it's clear, we are not forgetting the value of our volunteers in this system. Goochland's in this unique position where we've been blessed for many years to have volunteers serving us in substantial capacities. And in recent years, that has declined some. That does not mean that we are not encouraging more volunteer participation, or I would love to not have to come and ask you for additional staff each year. But I also have to balance that I know as I get every 911 call on my phone every day, I want to make sure that when our residents call 911, we have adequate staffing. And that is a balance of supporting our volunteers to grow and flourish and making sure that we have career personnel. So it's a balance. Chief Ferguson will talk to you a little bit more about that. I am pleased to share with you that as we look at making sure that we have the right people on the street, we want to make sure that they're outfitted with the proper equipment to respond. This budget does include a new ladder truck for the east end of our county for next fiscal year. This has been in our plans. This wasn't new. As we continue to look at the demands and responses on the eastern area, it was important for us to, if it was possible, to reprioritize this, and we were able to move it up a fiscal year in our recommendation here to you today. That's consistent with what you had seen back in January, but that is a slight change from what others had seen, and it does get that needed resource into our community a little sooner than the prior capital improvement plan. We continue the other investments in tools and uniforms and such. The 25-year CIP is about $83 million. This, as you know, in the current budget, and we're actively looking for property for some replacement stations and new stations. The 25-year CIP looks broadly at additional stations throughout our community and continues our investments in our equipment and uniforms and such. That plan is consistent with the staffing requests and plan that we had. Animal protection, one of the things that I am pleased to be able to say with confidence, we will be in the new animal shelter for fiscal year 21, and hopefully by the end of this fiscal year. And we believe that our new partnership with Horgan Construction has really changed that project. You wouldn't believe it, but they're laying flooring today. And so it is moving well, and we'll be announcing some of the opening. But going from a 2,000 square foot shelter to a 14,000 square foot shelter, there were operational impacts, and this budget sustains and supports our ability to operate the new shelter. And last but not least, in strategic goal 4 is our Office of Children's Services. This is one of the programs that we are mandated to support from the state. We have seen some rising costs in there and project some service level cost increases. You will hear and have an opportunity, Mr. Jones will be in the room to talk a little bit more about those impacts of children's services in upcoming weeks in further detail with you as it relates to that program. And last but not least, it just happens to be goal number 5, but it is the final one that I'm going to share with you here today, is our employees. And for us, just like the schools, our most valued resource is the employees that serve us each and every day. There's a number of things that we're sharing with you here today. The first one I'd love to take all the credit for, but it's our employees that get the credit. We are not seeing a premium increase, so they don't have to receive one this year. And so our costs were down, and we are not anticipating any premium increase to our employees. This budget proposes a 2% merit increase. for all of our employees. This is consistent with what other jurisdictions are doing in the region on their merit. We've talked about other percentages, and this is where we're seeing the region commitment to their employees is at 2%. I shared with you earlier in the school's budget, they have a commitment to work on their wages and position costs as well, and so this budget does support the school side as well as the county side. You will see, and Ms. Parrish will talk a little bit about our healthcare options. We are proposing an adjustment to our retiree healthcare program in the introduced budget to you to allow the option for participation by our retirees. And it's really for those that want to pay in after age 60. And Ms. Parrish will talk to you a little bit more about that and share with you some language for your consideration. The last but not least, we went through another benchmark exercise for the region. We are proposing to implement it just like we did prior years of spreading it out over 3 years, and this budget includes year 1 of the benchmark introduction to address some salary inequities that we identified in the region. So let's talk a little bit about where the positions in this budget are being recommended to you. And in this budget, we are recommending a full-time GIS technician. This is in support of the growing demands on our GIS department, ongoing functionality increases. Almost every program that we do has some basis in GIS at this point. The new community development software has a tie-in to it. Our assessor system has a tie-in to it. Our commissioner of revenue treasurer. The demands for GIS have grown. Our CAD system has a basis in GIS. And right now we have 1 employee that serves that function. We saw the value in increasing this here. I shared with you the deputy and dispatcher positions. The fire and EMS is consistent with the fire and rescue plan. We do have 3 part-time positions recommended in this, and one's a plan review assistant for the fire marshal. You know we have a part-time fire marshal now. That workload has grown tremendously. Doug, he's here. He probably works more than he tells us sometimes, but this is to get a little more assistance in that area. There is a recommendation for some part-time hours for an administration assistant in administration. And the convenience center, just to be clear, this is showing as 1 part-time. What this is actually to cover the hours of part-time to increase those Wednesdays and Sundays. So it's ultimately a set number of hours that we're recommending in this budget. It's not actually 1 part-time person. It's just an increase in those hours. We have recommended an additional custodian in the introduced budget. Between the additional square footage that we've taken on, there has been a great deal of demand on our custodian services. These are some of our, the hardest working employees in the county, and they really, their workload has grown, and they've done a great job trying to keep up with it. We are recommending an additional position to support that demand. And in utilities, as I said earlier, utilities is a little bit different, even though we're always sensitive to when we add positions. There's an additional customer service support specialist. So this is the front-end position that would back up and support the customer service center for walk-ins. It also assists with all of our customer billing, project tracking, all those kinds of things. And as utilities has grown and we plan to undertake projects, this position is critical in support of that. That position is actually funded with utility revenues. It's not out of the general fund, so it's slightly different. As you can see, there's 13 full-time positions and 3 part-time. 10 of those positions are being recommended for public safety and 3 non-public safety. This is consistent with the board's identified strategic plan. Let me put this in a little bit more context for you. This chart shows you positions from 2009 until 2021. You can see in most of the general government positions, we've been relatively flat, maybe a position or 2 here and there. Public safety is clearly where we've made investments over the past number of years in our positions, and this budget continues that investment in our public safety areas of our community. Let me explain this chart for you. We always get asked about how are you managing within your means. Our residents have to do it on each and every day. And we look at this, and you can pick this chart apart if you want to. And we took inflation and population growth and sort of projected out where the general fund budget is being projected. As you can see, if you just use those two factors alone, our budget has not exceeded the general growth in our community. And we've used this chart before to try to illustrate this position, and even with the introduced budget going up, we maintain still relatively well positioned if you just look at those two factors. If you try to calculate some other things in, but this is one we've shared with our residents in years past. Let me talk a little bit about utilities. You will get a full update from Matt and team on the utilities budget, but ultimately you can see where the major investments are in the operating capital, how much of it's coming from the TCSD, and that's again primarily, you'll see, we'll talk a little bit about the TCSD and where those funds go. This budget does continue the implementation of our rate study recommendations of 5% on water and 6% on sewer. What's this mean for an average customer? It's about a $5.28 every other month kind of bill in our utility system. And if we have a few new board members, when their utility rate study came out, they actually recommended a percentage increase that was not acceptable to the board at that time. And that was about 2-3 years ago at this point. We tempered back those rate increases pretty dramatically to get to the 5% and 6% and sustain those. And that primarily covers our fees and purchases and cost of operations. Utility system, I call it an enterprise system and suggest that it operates more like a business. The only difference is we're not trying to make a profit, but we're also not trying to lose money. And so we need to make sure the utility operates at a net positive basis. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the Tuckahoe Creek Service District. As many in our community know, the Tuckahoe Creek Service District covers certain parcels, primarily in the eastern end of our counties, bordered to our east by Henrico County, really over to sort of Mannequin area, up to Henrico, up to Hanover, and down to Route 6. And there's parcels that are exceptions within those general boundaries, but they pay an additional tax in order to pay the debt service on the system that we put in place back in 2002, 2003 general time frame. And based on the bond documents that have been modified over time, we have certain commitments to pay back those bond obligations. What you're seeing in this chart, the blue is the ad valorem tax that we have been collecting over the years. The orange is the commercial properties and the Kenlock subdivision. We also take, based on what they were paying back at 2002 to what their value is now, 55% of that also is contributed to paying back the debt on the Tuckahoe Creek Service District. As you can see from this chart, as we look into 21, in no year, even in our projections through 2028, which is when the debt service levels off, does the ad valorem tax alone cover the debt service. But in numbers of those years, the combined revenue of the 55 and the ad valorem exceeds the debt service. The debt service is that gray line that you're seeing up there. And what's that mean for us? It means we're in a positive position to look at down the road of, can we refinance this? Can we use this to pay things off early? But they are obligated to the obligations of this system. And so those are conversations the board will have over future years. But we are well positioned to meet the debt service. What it also tells you is, if we're ever in a position where we have some down years, we don't have to immediately do some kind of rate adjustment for folks in the Tuckahoe Creek Service District and cause rate shock. We actually have funds building up in a reserve that will help us deal with that if that should ever occur. And so the Tuckahoe Creek Service District, my hope is your takeaway is the Tuckahoe Creek Service District is sound, and we're in a strong financial position to meet the obligations of that system. I said earlier that I'm really proud of our 53-cent tax rate, but I think it's unfair to not put it in context for those that also pay the Tuckahoe Creek Service District tax rate. And so as you can see, while we're still very favorably in the region at 85 cents of combined tax rate, it is something that we look at as a combined rate, and as we look at our ability to fund services and our regional competitiveness from an economic development standpoint and cost burden to all of our residents. So it is something that we look at not only at the 53-cent rate, but also the combined rate as well. So this chart gives you a little bit of perspective of why that orange has actually grown. And it's grown because we've had increased investment in primarily our commercial sector. We've had, Kenlock has done well, and the values in Kenlock are strong, but this is really our commercial investment that we've had that's been able to drive some of these increases for our community. And so this gives you, hopefully, some of the work that we're doing on an economic development front, people realizing that Goochland is a great place to make an investment. We'll continue to see growth in this particular area, and we have projects that we already know that are in the pipeline that will get their certificate of occupancy over the next few years that should see this continue to grow. I'd be remiss if I didn't share with you, I shared with you some of our priorities and where we were able to fund some of the projects. For me, it's extremely exciting to be able to tell you that we're meeting and confronting the public safety needs of our community, as well as the other goal areas of the county, and supporting our public education. And so I'm really proud of what we're introducing you here today, but I have to tell you, it's not without its challenges. Not every request from every department was able to be met. And you'll have an opportunity to learn more about those. The budget you have, you'll see requested and recommended. In here, you'll also see prior year actuals and some history data. We want you to know, my job is to try to bring you a balanced budget, what I think the priorities are of the county and that align with the board's priorities. But there are unmet needs as well. And that's every year, that's not just this year. We try our best to work within the departments and understand the implications of, okay, if I can't fund this position, how else can we tackle that, or what's it mean? And so by no means do I want to undervalue the positions I wasn't able to recommend. There are positions that are of value not only to the department but our community, but within the balance of what we are working with here. That's how I got to those recommendations. We are seeing 5% growth in assessed values. Last year when we were over 6, I told you, I don't know how long we could sustain this. And I continue to have that concern. And so as we get into future years, while we have staffing plans and have goals, some of those could be impacted if our revenue streams, we're using 3% again for our projections for next year, but if we don't sustain that level or higher, some of our priorities will have to be revisited. And so it is an issue. I will say that what I'm seeing as far as our growth in value in Goochland County is not inconsistent at all with the region. It's pretty, matter of fact, dead on with what I'm hearing from other jurisdictions. But it's not even the same throughout our county. We're seeing increased value more easterly, westerly was very similar to prior year. So we have dynamics in our own community, let alone the region. But that is something that we need to be sensitive as we move forward. Road projects are going to continue to be a challenge. I know we've been working on, following some legislation. Time will tell if that actually makes a difference for us in Goochland, but our road needs far exceed what the available state funding that we have at our availability today. Public safety, I think as not only in public safety, we're seeing volunteer challenges everywhere. Parks and rec programs and things that parents used to be able to give a lot more of their free time to. That's no different in public safety. Public safety just has the extra demands that you also have to meet extra training criteria and all those kinds of requirements. And so I think volunteerism, not only in public safety, but across the board, is going to be a challenge for us as a community, where we once benefited, and we still value it tremendously and get great benefit from it. Volunteer impacts are felt across the board. Trying to make sure that our salary and compensation is competitive. In most cases, we're not leading the market, but we want to make sure that we are competitive, and we've taken some steps, not only in this budget, but in prior years. We did public safety adjustments, and our benchmark program has helped us with that. Public education, the state, if you look back over time, may not be funding quite what they once did on a per capita basis, and that is an issue for every jurisdiction. Goochland, for good or bad, we're not as dependent on the state, but we certainly could direct funds in other ways or cut costs if the state was stepping up higher on public education. That being said, the budget that you have here, we're very proud of the public education system in Goochland County, and we want to try to support them and their goals as they move forward. Here, I don't want to underestimate it. I probably start my mind often with, okay, we want to do a new program, we want to do a new initiative. What's that going to mean to the resident that can't pay for their prescriptions or keep their lights on or whatever it may be that's their challenge? And so I take that serious in bringing you this recommendation and trying to balance those priorities. So today, in my presentation, is very high level. I know you have a lot of questions as it relates to the departments, and that's why all these professionals are here with me today, and will be for the months to come. I can't thank them enough. So today, you will hear from the sheriff, fire and EMS, animal protection, and Ms. Parrish will come in and do the overall workforce report. And then at the end, Ms. Horlacker will come up and talk to you about the tax rate authorization. Let me just explain that one real quick. We have to do that because it's a timing issue of when we advertise as it relates to our public hearings. And the only downside is if you guys decide you want to raise your tax rate, and I've never seen that happen, we'd have to re-advertise, but that's the board's prerogative. But you just know that as we have that conversation today. On February 25th, you will have further discussion about our revenue projections, debt policies, public utilities, Tuckahoe Creek Service District, folks from Judicial Administration, the General Government Administration, Community Development and Economic Development. So you have a full afternoon on February 25th. We will start all of these at 2 o'clock, by the way. On March 4th, that's our regular meeting. And weaved into our regular meeting on March 4th, Dr. Rayleigh will be here to talk about the schools and their CIP. The health, general services, and park sectors of our budget will be hit on March 4th. So these next 3 meetings, we get into a lot of individual sections of the budget. So if you have questions and those kinds of things at or before or around those meetings, is a very appropriate time to bring up additional concerns, thoughts, or questions. On March 10th, this will specifically be the 25-year CIP discussion. As it relates to, and again, other than transportation, almost everything's the same that we introduced to you back in January, but we want to come back and confirm that, and you will hear more about individual projects in some of these other presentations. The town halls generally are budget-centric kind of town halls in the spring. We'll be focusing on more of what I'd shared with you to get our residents' feedback. Ms. Lachelette read those off here earlier. April 7th, this is our regular meeting. During the afternoon, we'll come back to you and work on any amendments or any outstanding related issues. In the evening at 7 p.m., we will actually have April 6th?
No, it's 6 o'clock.
Or, I'm sorry, 6 o'clock.
You're the oldest.
Thank you. Thank you for that catch. At 6 o'clock, we will begin the evening public hearings and go through the different rates and those kinds of things at that evening, hear from our residents. As needed, we could call any meetings between April 7th and 21st as needed, but hopefully we will work towards accomplishing our budget review for board consideration and adoption on April 21st. And that's at 2 o'clock. Thank you. We only looked at this 12 times,
Yeah,
but
right.
We're all excited about the new change, and sorry we missed it here. So, just in conclusion, as I said earlier, I'm really proud that I think we are able to focus on some of our priority needs of public education, public safety. It sustains our operational levels of support, increases in some areas, hopefully increases our customer service abilities. And we've been able to do that without increasing our property tax rate and our TCSD tax rate as well. We will continue to work with the board on your strategic plan, but supporting those initiatives and our partners at the schools, and all done in the context of hearing from our residents. So, Madam Chairman, with that is the county administrator's introduced budget. I am glad to take any general questions the board may have at this time. Ms. Horlacker and her team are here to help me at the high level. But as I said earlier, almost everything I went over, you will get some level of individualized presentation on from here over the next few months to dive maybe more specifically in with those subject matter experts from the department level. So I'm glad to do my best to answer any questions, but if needed, I got some help. So.
Board members? Questions? Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Badesky, I know this is the kickoff session. We're just getting started here, but I just wanted to thank you and your staff again 450 pages of a budget for a county our size is a very heavy lift. This is a massive undertaking. And again, it looks like you set out to create state-of-the-art and an excellent document. And it sounds like this is a repetitive comment, because we've done this on the CIM, the CIP, the county. Every document you produce, every planning document is just, it sets the gold standard for the state of and the Commonwealth. So I want to thank you for that at the outset and for all the effort that went into it to get us to where we are today. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Peterson. Any other comments or questions at this point? No, hearing none. Okay, Mr. Podesky, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll turn it over. I'll ask I believe the sheriff's up there.
Yeah, it's on page 105 in the board packet if you can follow along. Or at least I believe it's correct. Okay. Well, good afternoon, Sheriff Creasy. It's nice to be able to say that.
Good afternoon. Madam Chair, Board, Mr. Podesky, thank you for having me this afternoon. Before I get started, I do want to say thanks to Mr. Podesky and Barbara. It has definitely been a learning experience and a pleasure working with both of them through this process, and I really appreciate the guidance and support throughout this time. I've also brought with me today Major Mike East, Sergeant Troy May, and Lieutenant Layton. When it comes to questions, if you have something, they may end up jumping in as well. All right, what'd I do, Lisa? Oh, there we go. Wrong way.
Okay.
All right. As you may know, Goochland County Sheriff's Office is a primary law enforcement agency. Our law enforcement agency maintains the responsibilities much more than those of a police department, like our friends in Henrico County. Not only are we responsible for a primary response to the residents when they call for assistance, we are also responsible for all civil process in Goochland County, along with doing all transports for court, maintaining the court security, which includes the security of the judge, the staff, the judicial staff, the inmates, and the citizens in the courtroom. Also with that, we're also responsible for the emergency communications in Goochland County, basically the 911 dispatchers. And all that emergency communications officers are dispatchers. All of them are employees for the Sheriff's Office. A few of our goals for FY21 is to maintain our safe community through delivering the high-quality law enforcement services and community partnerships. One thing for the point number 2, recruit and retain highly qualified professionals. Just something that I am proud of right now. In March 7th, I believe the date is, we are testing 24 applicants. Just in a month alone, we received 34 applications between January 1 and January 31st. So I'm very pleased with that. So I'm looking to fill the holes that we do have with any one of those 24, and they are pretty good qualified candidates. And with that, the crime analyst position, I have a final interview with her on the 26th of this month. So that's looking very promising as well. Also, I want to preserve the fiscal responsible practices of the Goochland County Sheriff's Office, and also innovative use of current and emergency technologies in law enforcement. Everything's going digital. All right, how does Goochland prepare? What I did here is just put a couple of our neighboring counties here. You see Goochland has 40 deputies. That's when we are completely full. As you know, we've had 3 retirements as of January 1. Powhatan 43, Cumberland 17, and then Louisa has 80. And then if you see the populations, the square miles in land, and then also the number of residents per deputies. We're at 1 deputy per 587. And then if you look down at Louisa, we're at they're 1 deputy every 460. And I threw Henrico in there, but just keep in mind Henrico Police Department does not handle the jail civil process, transports, or anything like that. They do not handle that. All right, moving on. I just want to make you all aware of this, that this budget was authored by the previous administration, and these are some of the amendments that my administration has suggested, which is 6 deputies, 1 dispatcher, Project Lifesaver, which y'all heard about just a little while ago, and also psychological exams for all new hires. I definitely think that is very, very important. And then additional training funds for Celebrate, which that is downloading phones. That's about $8,000 per class, per person. And then much needed is cell phones for deputies. All right, here's just a little shot of the sheriff's office budget, the overall budget, where you see with the requested and then the proposed. One thing that we would like to do with the deputy positions in FY21 is, in order to serve our citizens, we would definitely like to have a mandatory minimum of 4 deputies. That's right, only 4 deputies, 24/7. With the 6 requested, we could do that. You'll see on the next slide, we proposed a 5-year staffing plan, which will allow us to have a minimum mandatory of 6, potentially even 7 deputies, 24/7. And we would hit that in 2025. Here's the staffing plan for it, and this will bring us to 24 deputies, 2 dispatchers, and also 2 non-sworn. But also with this number, please keep in mind that, 1, this is fluid, depending on growth and how the different emergency needs of the county changes over the years, which I'm sure it will. But this is also not just deputies for patrol. This is deputies who are going to work court, go out and serve papers. They're going to work school resource officers, community division, and investigations. These are not just earmarked for patrol. And with the dispatchers, I just wanted to note with the EMD, that does pull a strain on it, on dispatch. When you're on an emergency medical dispatch call, it is very time consuming. And just from January 14th to February 12th, they had 10 EMD calls from one address in the county. From one address. It was a nursing home that's in the county, but they had 10 calls within that. That's a short period of time to have that amount for one address. All right, this is just a map of our county. This is how we have our sectors lined up. As you can see in the top left, it's the northwest sector, Shannon Hill, Haydensville, then going down to the east end, the northeast sector, Centerville. Our plan, I'm not sure how to put a light on this thing, but our plan, if we are able to do a mandatory 4 minimum, we will end up having, see if I can work this thing. Hold on.
The little asterisk at the top, the little.
Ah, gotcha, thank you.
There you go.
All right, for having 4 mandatory minimum, we would have 1 deputy assigned to the west end, 1 to central, 1 to east, and this is mandatory minimum. You know, our shifts right now are 2 5s and 2 6s, as in the total staff. So if we end up having a mandatory minimum, 1 here, 1 here, 1 there, and then we would have a supervisor floating the whole county. When we get up, hopefully if we get up to the 2025 mandatory minimum of, I'm going to say 7 because I'm pretty sure we can do it, you're going to have 1 in each sector, right? And then you have a supervisor available for the whole county. With this number of 24 and this mandatory minimum, that would actually, though, give us 10 deputies per shift for 24/7, with exception of the ones training, sick, vacation, all that. We just had 2 deputies go out on injury last weekend. We got 2 with the flu right now, so we're working on getting through that right now. Just an explanation of the increases in some of the budgets, 1, personnel. Also the programs that you're going to see on the slide later on that we plan on bringing to Goshen to benefit all citizens. and we talked about the psych interview for all candidates in employment. Also, we're getting to the time we have deputies who have been here for 7+ years, and we're to the time where they got to replace their uniforms, the equipment is getting old. We just at that time that it really needs to be replaced. We're also looking at for high-tech surveillance cameras, and then we all know what's going down in the General Assembly. We're expecting a ammunition cost hike with this. Also, with training, dispatchers they have to go through continuing education, just like law enforcement and EMTs, with emergency medical dispatch. We have it out where we're going to have to send them to different places to get the training, but we also are working on doing training, as much training as possible, to save money in-house. Then with the law enforcement officers, with the different training, with the digital technologies as the Celebrate that I explained earlier, we got to go there. We have one person in the sheriff's office right now that's certified with it, but we need to have the extra people in there. All right, this is just the quick shot of the emergency communications budget where we requested one as proposed one. And this is just a future outlook for the emergency communications. We've already been talking with Powhatan County, their communications office, to just work on the interoperability between Goochland and Powhatan. They've actually visited our facility as long as I've been over there to theirs and looking at working with them. We're talking about possibly putting a little portable station in Goochland and one in Powhatan. If something would happen to Powhatan's communication, that they would be able to just come in here, put a temporary fix for their communications, and we would do that vice versa over there. This is a thought that we're looking at doing. Also, we're planning on adding an emergency communications supervisor, and that's something the Chief Ferguson, the fire department, will, without a doubt, play a very active role in selecting the best candidate for that position. And then one thing we're going to do is evaluate the usage, the optimal usage of the communications center. And we're going to partner with Fire and Rescue with that to make sure that we are getting the optimal use out of our systems. Bless you. This is just some numbers we're doing here. These are all the calls for dispatch. As you can see, in 2019, we're over 30,000, which is a lot. And those are all calls for everything. And then the sheriff's calls, we went up a little bit from 2018 to 2019. And then for the sheriff courts related, that's just a little, once again, I know you already seen this, but I wanted to add this in there, where we have the 4 full-time positions. But I do want to make it clear that those full-time positions are not completely assigned to do nothing but court. We operate court. Lieutenant Layton is in charge of the court security. He's our only full-time court person to work it, and we operate using part-time employees. We use the court security guys. They're unsworn, who run the monitors outside so it doesn't cost as much as a regular deputy. And then the correction detention, that really, when it comes down to that, that really depends on how many, for lack of better terms, how many customers we have for that year. Then the grants, that's just a continuing grant that we use for DMV. It's a safety grant that they give to the sheriff's office as well as other agencies. And that's a no match. That's straight from them to us. And that's actually used for speed enforcement, DUI enforcement throughout the entire county. Also, click it or ticket programs are ran through that. A few of the ongoing community events and programs that we're doing are there. Just a note, Kids Fishing Day is coming up in May. That's always a big turnout at the Boy Scouts. We also plan on upping our classes for hidden in plain sight. Where we have been to the schools, we've had them at the sheriff's office, where anybody who's 18 or over can come in and look at the different hiding places where people conceal weapons, drugs, and that sort. We also work with the NRA and Refuse to be a Victim class. We got 2 instructors here, and we go around teaching that as well. And then we also teach active shooter response. And we have partnered with Jason and Riddles. We're actually meeting with them next week to do a active shooter drill with them later on this year. And here's a few things that we plan on bringing to Goochland County in FY21. As we talked earlier, Project Lifesaver. And then we're sort of partners with Project Lifesaver is a little a sheet that you should have in front of you called Handle with Care. And what it is, that's basically assist communications and care for our residents and families with special needs and disabilities. Once a resident or a family applies to our program with our office, we will meet with them and discuss just specific needs that they have for their loved ones. And these special needs could range from autism to dementia, even someone just needing a lift assist. What we do is we place an alert on their address. Whenever a deputy or fire and rescue is responding there, they will get this alert, and those special needs will come up on the computer. We're also looking into adding this to a license plate if it's needed. And then we are ordering these stickers that we can put on the back of a car, on the windshield, or on the front door, side door of their homes. So when a deputy or EMS responds, they will know that, hey, there is somebody here that we need to handle with care, and they can look in the computer and get all the details about that. Also, we're working on a cop camp, what we're calling it, but it's basically a youth camp for ages 9 to 12. It's just going to be a week long, probably from 9 a.m. to 1. We're still in the preliminary phases of working on that. But we're really looking forward to that, just to building those relationships with the kids from ground up. You know, I think that will help us out in future relationships with them. We're also bringing back DARE to the schools. And that is basically, we're going to use DARE until we can make our own program that is fit for Goochland. And then senior citizens is basically the same thing as the Citizens Academy that we have now. But we're going to do one for the senior citizens, and we're going to basically do that during the daytime, where it's easier for them to get around instead of driving at night. Which we do have a Citizens Academy getting ready to start next weekend. We are completely full. We are actually overloaded. Then working on getting a unwanted drug drop box and an American flag retirement box, which we're going to place in the lobby of the sheriff's office. Just a couple other noteworthy things is we are doing an internal audit of all the Goochland Sheriff's Office property. Right now, it is very time consuming. We are doing it shift by shift and then division by division, but it's very time consuming. Well, also, as I speak now, I drug Sergeant May away from it, but we are actually going through a mock accreditation. We have agency heads from 5 different agencies over at the Sheriff's Office right now, as I speak, doing a mock reaccreditation. And that is very trying, but it is actually going very, very well. And we're looking forward to having them, or a different group of people, back in March to do the reaccreditation, which they are right now saying it should be a breeze. Then in FY 2021 also, I would like to have the Sheriff's Office partner up with ICAC, as y'all seen in the news recently, what happened down in the east end of the county. We are definitely going to join ICAC, probably starting off as a part-time. I've already reached out to every single county that joins us that touches Goochland County and talked about the program and what do they see the pros and cons of each one. So I think it's going to be a very huge benefit for Goochland County with funds and free training. And then looking at something in the future, once we master the accreditations for through Virginia, we're looking at possibly doing CALIA, which is a national accreditation nationwide. I mean, it's a big project, but I believe the Sheriff's Office is there, and we look at partnering with them in the near future. And that is it. I feel like I blew through that.
All right, thanks, Sheriff. Board, any questions?
Quick,
Okay, Mr. Lumpkins?
couple of questions, quick. Thank you, Sheriff Creasy, and I'll just say, thank you very much. The fact that we had these slides up here beforehand gave me a chance to look through them in advance, and it's, you know, I think the board's constituents are going to have, are going to expect us and will have no problem us supporting your office, particularly with this transparency that you're presenting. It's really going to help us, help you. Thank you so much for opening this up and showing us some details.
Yes, sir.
More of a comment, I know I'm still getting my legs under me about how the compensation board works or doesn't work. And it's something I'm looking at all of our constitutional officers is, you know, are we doing all we can to make sure the compensation board, so in our budget packet, the 400 and some pages that we went through this weekend, I calculated that the comp board is covering about 18.8% of the sheriff's office's operating expenses. When I look at this, it's hard to get data from the comp board's site, you know, particularly, I mean, the data is old on their site and staffing standards, I'm sure. So you start to lose it with all the variables and the lack of data. But under the statute, it says that 1 deputy per 1,500 in population. Using your population numbers on page 4, that we're just like a little over 15 and a half deputies that the comp board says, you know, or the statute and the comp board says are minimum. So I see you have 40 deputies. I think that's allocated. That's not what you actually have right now. You're a couple short of
three
that
short.
number. Yeah. But one question, an aside, a deputy is everybody from Major East down to your newest sworn hire, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'll just kind of leave this, and again, I'm new to this, and I'm sure the county staff is on top of it, but when you look at statute 15.2, 1609.1, it says, the respective number of full-time deputies appointed by the sheriff of a county shall be fixed by the comp board after receiving such recommendation of the Board of Supervisors of the county. Such recommendation shall be made to the comp board on or before April 1 of each year. So again, when I saw that and I'm looking at all this and thinking, when you take the 15 deputies minimum that they should have over the 40 that you have allocated, that's 0.375, or that's 37.5%. So they should be funding 37.5% of the deputies. I know there's other costs, but they're at 18.8% of our operating expenses. I know there's going to be a delta, but that seems to be a significant delta. My only point is, I just want to make sure that we do all we can. We're not going to adopt this budget before April 1st, but, and I don't know how it works, but we should be making a recommendation to the comp board. If it's going to matter in terms of funding from the comp board, I want to make sure we get our requests into the comp board in time per this statute.
I know right now the comp board actually pays for 24 positions. Not pays for, but gives a partial for Goochland. They give 5 dispatchers, a administrative staff, and then the rest are deputies.
So that's the number that they have for Goochland?
Yes.
Okay. See,
And
it's
just-
so hard to find that stuff, but, so the delta that we have there is our pay scale is different than what the comp board's willing to pay,
Correct.
right?
Yeah,
Okay.
oh, yes.
Okay.
And that is, and I have turned in, submitted a request to the comp board with 3 positions to the comp board, 3 new positions.
Okay, and that's all the comp board's expecting is something from you. The way the statute reads, I just want to make sure that
Right. Yeah, through the training that I went to back in December.
the Sheriff's
that worked-
Association,
Yes.
yeah.
And they actually recommended to me to add a position, but I added 2 more.
Good. Well, again, thank you for that information. I knew you were on top of it. You're rocking and rolling just for 45 days or whatever it is on the office. Got a lot on your plate, but well, let us know how we can support you. And I hope we can get all we can from the comp board. That'll certainly ease some pressure because the unfunded mandates are coming from your department, from the schools and other thing, and I don't think stuff that gets out of the General Assembly and signed by the governor this year is gonna reverse that trend.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lumpkins. Anyone else?
Real quick.
Okay, Mr. Spoonhour.
Hey, Sheriff Creasy, can you talk a little, and this may be a question for county administrators, may not be the best time to talk about it, but in regards to the CIP for the new vehicles, would you recommend we for that now, or? So can you talk a little bit about I think this is the first year we're recommending the expenditure for the vehicle replacement at $435,000 a year and ongoing. Can you talk a little bit about that need and how we came up with that?
Yeah, from my understanding, that was, it's not new. It's been on there from the previous administration for the 435K. And what it is basically what they have set up is just saying, I hate to say it, but it's just a rotation from cars. But there's one thing that we have discussed with my administration, as in what we plan on doing from in between now and next budget year, is to really dive into that so we can figure out what we do need and why we need it. Right now, it's 8 cars. Each car right now, with a cage included, is going to cost about 52, Troy? 52, 53? Per car. And that's fully loaded. I don't mean loaded like, electric start or anything like that. I mean with the lights in it, with the siren in it, with the computers in it, with the cage in it, everything in there. But for the number of cars is, a lot of it is, if we end up having a crash, we've had, I think I was talking to Wanda, she's not in it now, but I think we had 4 crashes already this year that took 4 cars out for a while.
I think you could, because I think, I may have read, maybe with the original spreadsheet wrong, and I thought this was new, that we were trying to replace the fleet, and was just kind of curious what the schedule would look like, but it does, I may have been mistaken, so.
Okay.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that.
Okay.
Ms. Peterson.
Madam Chair, thank you. Sheriff Creasy?
Yes, sir.
Sounds good. One of your pages, you show 24 new deputies over the next 5 years. First question to follow on the vehicle side, does the CIP include enough vehicles to accommodate that degree of expansion of your boots on the ground so that they have a steering wheel on the ground too? Is that?
That would be an extra.
So those extra vehicles are not in the CIP at this point?
Not at this point, no.
Can I
Okay.
just clarify?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
So for instance, if he has 4 new deputies next year, we budget the new vehicle in the operating side the first year to have vehicles for the new assigned officers. I think what your question is the 435 going to be enough sustaining
Right.
if your fleet's growing? So instead of replacing 80 a year, you're going to need to replace 9 or 10. The answer to that is possibly we will have to come back in future years and adjust that ongoing replacement cycle. Not only in the sheriff's department, but countywide, we're going to have to look, we're looking at our overall, and the schools agreed to talk to us in this process about looking at our overall fleet. So it's the replacement cycle of the fleet, it's the maintenance of the fleet, it's our fueling of the fleet. All of those kinds of things is one of the projects that we're going to be doing collectively over the next year.
Good, good, okay, because if a vehicle lasts 5 years, then you need to replace 1/5 every year. And if you double the size of your fleet, you need to double the size of the 1/5 becomes twice as big. So they just want to make sure all the math hangs together. It sounds like we're going to be taking a close look at that, so that's good, I appreciate that. And then your sense on those additional 25, and this really calls for more just a general impression, is it to close a gap in service, increase the level of service above where it is today, and or accommodate growth going forward in population by Weldon Cooper? Are we trying to hit a new level of service? Are we just keeping pace with the growth in population, or are we closing gaps that you?
The 25 is, I would say, it's more keeping ahead of the curve
Okay.
when it comes to
Okay.
it.
Because I know citizens are very attuned to the growth going on, and they do not want any deterioration in the quality of service. I just didn't know if this was to catch up or to plan ahead, or just, and it sounds like you're planning ahead for the future
Positions-
growth.
The positions for this year are to catch up.
And so to a certain extent, it will be growth dependent. If growth's not there, then obviously the need wouldn't be there, but and we'll monitor that going forward. Last thing I had, Madam Chair, and then I'll yield back, is I looked at these new programs that you're launching. I like them a lot. Some of these you look at and you go, well, how come we haven't been doing these all along? Because they're almost no-brainers, but I really do like the new programs you're putting in place, so thank you for that. And that's all I had, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Mr. Peterson. Sheriff Creasy, I just had a couple things I wanted to ask you about. One, I believe I know the answer to, but I just like to kind of get it on record. So our 911 dispatchers, what percentage of them have the medical training, for the medical dispatch training?
14 out of 15.
14 out of 15, okay. So pretty much, when someone calls in, they're gonna get a dispatcher. So if they get that 15th person, it doesn't, they'll just transfer it to someone?
Someone, as long as they're not already on an emergency medical dispatch
Right.
line call,
Okay.
they can jump in.
Okay.
And
that's-
she's getting ready to go to training probably here within the next couple months.
Okay, wonderful. So we'll be full, and as you go forward in hiring those positions, that's what you would be wanting to do?
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
have them, right?
ma'am. Every
I appreciate that. I think that's something the citizens had asked for, and I think it does give a lot of comfort, so I like that. I know this is probably a very minor part of the budget, but we did get a lot of questions about the Project Lifesaver program, and I'm really glad that you're including that. And I may have missed it, but can you tell me what the expense for that program is estimated?
To get it going and the estimated population that will use it is about $8,500.
8,500 per year's estimated cost,
No, that's the startup.
okay?
And then every year thereafter, it really depends on how many people take advantage of it.
All
But I
right,
could see it being about $3,000 roughly.
Okay.
Every year.
okay, all right, thank you very much. One more question, Mr. Spanish?
One of the things I didn't see in here, Sheriff Creasy, and I guess I could be happy to not see it, but from a program perspective is, there's such an issue right now with the opioid addictions. Are there programs that you would want to put on, but you haven't from a budget perspective? Because I know that's a concern as well, is like, how are we handling that from a county perspective? Just to know your thoughts about programs that are available that maybe we're not reaching out for because of the budgets.
A lot of the programs for that is myself, and then we have a dispatcher who are Narcan instructors who teach Revive. We just had a class at the sheriff's office last week. We're going to a church, a local church, in April to teach a class. So we're already working on the Narcan or Revive, which we've actually been doing for probably about 2 years now.
Great, so you feel like you've got the funding you need to address these issues?
For that, yes.
Great.
That's your question? Well, thank you very much, appreciate it, great job.
Thank you.
Okay, and so next up, we have Fire Rescue, Chief Ferguson and company. That's right, yeah, we travel in groups, right?
Okay, so good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board, Mr. Podesky. It's a privilege and honor to stand before you today and present the fire rescue budget, as well as serve as the fire chief for such a great organization made up of men and women who give their time to help others throughout the county. I'll tell you that also today we have our leadership team here with us, and they certainly can help us if you have any questions. We have Deputy Chief Mike Watkins, Deputy Chief Tony Gordon, and Fire Marshal Doug Davies here. And so they're here with us today to get started. So Goochland County Fire Rescue is an all-hazards premier combination department that responds and handles fire suppression, emergency medical services. We respond to hazardous materials incidents, technical rescue, and also water rescue, and provide other services as required. In addition to that, Goochland County Fire Rescue responds to emergency management type needs throughout the county. We certainly are in emergency management from the standpoint for any type of disasters that could occur in the county, whether it be man-made or weather-related or natural disasters. We try to prevent as many emergencies as possible by educating our residents to avoid preventable incidents and minimize the need for emergency services throughout the county. In alignment with your strategic goal number 4, high-quality core services to include education, public safety, and community health, we try to align our goals along the same lines. We respond to calls for assistance in a timely and professional manner. We try to create order out of chaos and treat all members of the community and organization with dignity and respect. Perform our functions in a physically sound manner, respecting the physical investment that the community has made in our department. We have a highly skilled and diverse workforce that combines with both volunteer and career members, forming our combination department as equal partners. 2019 was a very interesting year for fire rescue, challenging in some ways and a very good year in other ways. I'll tell you there was a lot of progress, a lot of accomplishments in 2019. Fire Rescue responded to 3,284 calls for service in 2019. The call volume was relatively flat with a slight increase from what it was in 2018. And many of departments around us, and we also attribute a lot of that to, in 2019, we were really lucky and we didn't have a lot of major weather events. We didn't have the big snowstorms, the tropical systems. While we did have some thunderstorms that did inflict some property damage, we didn't have those high call generator events that would have inflated our call volume up. I will tell you that along those same lines, I am happy to report there were no fire-related deaths in the county from house fires. That is really important, and we're really glad to be able to report that. And we had no major injuries to our personnel, which we're grateful for. The other good news is that with our increased staffing, as well as the many hours that our volunteer partners put into the fire rescue department, we did the best that we ever have to date in meeting our EMS response time standards. Now, I just want to give you a little background on the EMS response time standards. These are required. Each jurisdiction has to adopt what they feel is realistic. We get to choose the numbers required by the Virginia Office of Emergency Medical Services, which is part of the Virginia Department of Health. And if you look at that, Goochland County, we actually have a response time standard for the east end of the county and also for the west end of the county. Obviously, the large geographic area in the west end of the county is longer travel distances and so forth, and requires a little bit more time to get to the scene of emergencies. If you notice that we are averaging about 90% compliance in both areas, 88.23% in the east end and about 93.27% in the west end. With the inception of staffing in the west end at Fire Station 4 and the increased staffing overall in the county, there are more units available, more units in their districts when the calls come in, which shortens travel time and also helps turnout time out the door. The Office of EMS does require that jurisdictions who adopt the response time standards try to comply with those 90% of the time. We have to review, in conjunction with our operational medical director, we review the ones that are the outliers. Sometimes there could be a situation where we didn't reach the scene soon enough because of an address wasn't posted, or it could have been a situation where the scene was unstable and we had to stage and wait for law enforcement to clear the scene, or some other type of situation. Some of our recent accomplishments, as we've already said, we did staff all 6 of our fire rescue stations with at least 2 career members, working in conjunction with our volunteer members as of October the 1st, which has produced almost a 2-minute reduction in response times. We're still watching that. We're still relatively new, but it is good news, and we're tickled to death about that. Over the last year, we had a very aggressive hiring process, thanks to HR and Mrs. Parrish. We actually hired, and I don't want to scare you with this number, I'll explain it, but we actually hired 15 new people last year because there were positions, we had 7 positions that were available to us in FY19, and we had positions that were unfilled that we couldn't fill in FY18. And then, unfortunately, we had 4 career members who left and went to other fire departments. And so that totaled up that we actually did bring on 15 new members in the calendar year 2019. And that was a first for us from a standpoint of having the capacity and the list of available applicants to be able to do that. Some of the creative things we did with that was we hired our first 2 EMS-only employees, and we sent those individuals. One went to Louisa for a regional training academy that we partnered with Louisa, and we have another one presently in Powhatan County in a fire academy. We also completed the 3rd of 5 purchases of our hydraulic rescue tool standardization project. Company 4 and 6 were able to get hydraulic rescue tools, and we've since ordered tools this year for companies 1 and company 3. So we're getting close on that. We ordered a new tanker. We really appreciate the support to be able to place the order for that, worked with purchasing to get that made in December. And we also implemented new medical protocols and new basic and advanced life support airway type equipment. We added to our tactical medics that work with the Goochland Sheriff's Office. The tactical medics are embedded into their special operations team. Obviously, the work that team does is high-risk type work for officer safety or anyone else who might get injured in any of their events or incidents that they respond to. So we were able to get a 3rd tactical medic. And I want to tell you that those tactical medics have the background for this, but they also have received special training to provide emergency medical care in that tactical type environment. Last year was a big push for protective equipment, personal protective equipment. Over 75 sets of structural equipment, turnout gear that went into the field. We had some gear that was timing out. NFPA requires the gear to be replaced every 10 years. In addition to that, we're trying to increase the number of sets of gear we have available, because when we start talking about our health initiatives and cancer, it's important that the firefighters be able to change into clean gear after going to a structure fire while their gear is being washed. We added to that same assemble with particulate filter hoods. This is a special type of Nomex hood that goes over the firefighter's head that has a special barrier in it that screens out and stops the particles from coming through that we believe causes cancer. And so this is a special type of hood. Each firefighter was provided with one, and we hope to buy a second one for each firefighter this year. Personal flotation devices were added to the fire engines and ambulances. We went out and we actually invested in 30 ballistic level 4 vests. And this would be for the situation, the unthinkable that if it were to occur, active shooter, active threat type situation where we had to have EMS and firefighters working under the cover of law enforcement on rescue task force teams going into those hostile areas of indirect threat. They would be able to wear those ballistic vests. And we have 3 on each ambulance, and we were able to get that. Traffic vest, highway safety, as you guys know, is one of our greatest areas of vulnerability. We were able to replace all of our traffic vests in the department last year with new ANSI compliant breakaway, tearaway vests that's on each vehicle. Thank you very much. We finally were able to order our new SCBA self-contained breathing apparatus. We ordered 125 units. They are on order. I was just asking about the project before I came here, and we may start to receive those units the end of March or April. And this will replace our breathing apparatus that's over 10 years old, another huge health and safety initiative, and another one of those things where NFPA requires a replacement periodically. You see the picture on the screen, the back of the fire engine 11 at Company 1. Those high visibility chevrons were just placed on that fire engine within the last week. And we have engine 631 at the Fire Training Center finishing up today. And we will have retrofitted all of our frontline engines that did not have the high visibility chevrons with that protective reflective equipment. We also did the same thing to 3 of our ambulances. And so a fleet of 10 ambulances, we have 7 now that have the high visibility markings on the back for added highway safety. So we were really excited about that. Trying to operate a little more efficiently in fire rescue administration with that many employees. We've grown fast, a lot fast. It becomes a management challenge, to say the least. They're all good people, but we all have time accounting and leave to manage and that type of thing. And we were allowed this year to actually go out and purchase some new software that actually helps us automate the timesheets and the leave management. But it's not just that. It gives us an emergency operations staffing tool so that volunteers and career members can sign up for shifts. And we can advertise where the holes are, where the vacancies are in advance, and then those members can go into that software, an app on their telephone, and actually put their time in. And this will be a new way that we'll account for staff hours and rescue and fire duty hours going forward. And we're just getting started with that, but so far it's saving countless hours when we start to do our timesheets, and we're operating at a higher level of efficiency. We're lucky this year to receive 2 new ambulances, $278,000 apiece. One went to Company 6, one went to Company 3. 2 quick response vehicles, 3 new staff vehicles. We promoted a fire chief and a deputy chief. Quite an interesting year, as I was saying. A lot to be thankful for. We promoted a captain in fire rescue administration. We installed a power load stretcher lift in the back of ambulance 650 that's stationed at Company 5. Now, if you see the picture there of the power load stretcher lift, it lifts the stretcher into the unit, helps to prevent EMS provider back injuries. It's also a cot retention system in the event of an accident. The stretcher stays secured, and it is part of the new GSA ambulance specifications nationwide that you have to have. So all of our new vehicles come with that, but we went back just recently and updated the ambulance at Company 5 with that, so we now have 3 of those. Gosh, as Sheriff Creasy just alluded to, a huge thing last year was the emergency medical dispatch program. That was just such a good thing that's helped us in so many ways. To expand on that a little bit, emergency medical dispatch began on June the 19th. It provides 911 callers that have medical emergencies or auto accidents with pre-arrival, first aid, EMS, emergency medical care type instructions before the fire, police, or the ambulances arrive on the scene. Some of the things that they routinely are doing are giving CPR instructions over the telephone twice this past weekend, bleeding control, childbirth. But you know what we're seeing because of this training and this software that's being used, credit goes to the sheriff's office and the dispatchers, is we're seeing the more appropriate dispatch of resources. The right resources go quicker and they arrive at the patient sooner, and particularly advanced life support is getting to our patients a lot sooner. I ran into a citizen. I know the citizen well. I won't call their name, but I was familiar with the call because I too was on the call, and she said, Eddie, she said, that dispatcher saved my husband's life. And I would tend to agree that that was definitely the case because the patient was absolutely critical. And when I walked in, the patient's wife was still on the phone with the dispatcher, giving that lady instructions on how to keep her husband breathing. So that's just one of many examples of how well that works. Fire rescue was lucky in 2019 and fortunate to receive recognition from the American Heart Association once again. The Mission Lifeline Award is a recognition of our ability to deliver cardiac care. In particular, the recognition of heart attacks, getting the right resources to the scene, getting that 12-lead EKG, that electrocardiogram done in the house, recognize the fact that the person could be having a heart attack, and making that call to the appropriate hospital so that they can open their cath lab. When the ambulance rolls in, the cath lab team is waiting. Many times the patient never sees the emergency department. They go straight to the cath lab, and their blockages are opened up and they're reperfused. And that's what it's all about. And so we were lucky and fortunate to have received that, and that's certainly because of the skill and the talent of all of our members, our volunteer and career members, but also the support from you and the citizens to have the right equipment and the right technology to deliver that type of care. Training was a busy topic for the Fire Rescue Department last year. We did our annual classes, our EMT classes, Fire Academy. Members went for advanced life support training. There were fire and EMS specialty classes like tactical schools for our medics assigned to the sheriff's office, ladder truck schools. We had members who went out of town to mid-rise and high-rise type fire training, bringing back those ideas to Goochland to address some of the mid-rises and some of the new buildings. And it doesn't have to be a high-rise building to use that training. Just a building that's has lots of square footage, like any of the schools, present similar challenges when you're dealing with fires in those types of buildings. Conferences, the EMS Symposium, the Virginia Fire Officers Academy, we did compliance training, but also want to thank you for your ongoing support for our online training platform, our Target Solutions. And that makes it convenient where members can go on that at a time of their convenience, whether they're on duty, off duty, and they can actually take classes, and particularly those classes go on to support our ISO requirements, but in addition to that, helps renew their EMS certifications. So we really appreciate that. Training was a busy year. With all the growth and development in the county and all the public hearings that we've had over the last year that I've become familiar with, I can tell you that our fire marshal is extremely busy. The pictures kind of say it all. Our fire marshal usually isn't quite that stern. It's more education than there is enforcement. He does a good job interacting with the public. But if you take a look at that picture of all these boxes and different things piled in front of that electrical panel, I mean, that's probably, you could find that in some convenience stores around the area, not just unique to Goochland, but all over the state. And so the fire marshal, a big job of what the fire marshal does is he enforces and educates the public of the statewide fire prevention code so that he keeps those businesses safe, so that when citizens are going in and out of there or employees that are working there are safe, but also when those buildings catch on fire, hopefully they don't catch on fire, prevent fires, but if they do, it makes it safe for us when we respond in as a fire rescue department. I would just call your attention to the number of inspections that he did working alone, 521 business inspections, and those numbers are growing. That 53 of them required, follow-up re-inspections. Again, education by telling them what they can do to correct their problem, not necessarily issuing notices of violation, although in some cases that has to be done. I would also bring your attention to the number of plans that are reviewed, and I'm talking about building plans where we work in conjunction with community development and our building inspections office, where we actually review the plans ahead of time. And I've been amazed, was exposed to that some in the past, but even more so now, the degree of concern and care. I'll give you an example. When you look at a subdivision or a business, it could be something that would seem as simple but as important to us of where the fire hydrant is, which side of the street it's on, which way it's facing, and where it could be moved to so it could actually serve other addresses in the same area. And so my hat's off to Fire Marshal Davies for the good work he does, and it's truly impressive the workload that's in his area. I want to thank you for allowing us to request and being proposed a operations budget that has a 14.7% increase in it. Yes, most of that is actually in personnel, the 5 full-time firefighter EMTs and 1 part-time plans review assistant fire marshal. But also you'll notice a substantial increase in our actual operating cost. And I'll cover why we need that a little bit later, or maybe on the next slide. So the personnel cost, when you figure the cost of the new employees with the fringe and benefits and salaries and so forth, uniforms, and our uniforms aren't necessarily inexpensive. Firefighter structural turnout gear for a new firefighter runs just under $2,500 a person, and there are other things that individual needs in addition to that. Some of our other costs are our new scheduling and inventory programs. I had mentioned earlier that we've implemented a new crew sense scheduler through our Target Solutions platform, where members can go on and sign up for duty, but also it helps us manage emergency operations. We can see where our people are, volunteer and career, their qualifications, and how many, and so forth. And it's a very user-friendly app. Gosh, vehicle repairs. Vehicle repairs hit us hard this year. I can tell you that we had a couple of ambulances. We were forced to make major investments in their motors. We had to replace a motor in one of the vehicles, and we had to nearly do the same for another just a short while later. And you know, we have a fleet of 10 ambulances, and the average mileage on those ambulances today, even with the induction of the new units, is 122,000 average miles per vehicle. And we appreciate the ability to have an aggressive CIP to help replace those. The other thing I'll tell you, dry hydrant maintenance. We've added a little more money to the budget to try to assist with the inspections of dry hydrants. We have 82 dry hydrants around the county that we're looking after, so to speak. But we've also found, and we'll talk about later, that some of them in need of some miscellaneous repairs. And so we are going after grant money for that. But in addition, we're hoping to be able to use some of our budget money to work on that, because many of them are on private property, where citizens have allowed us to put that in for the good of the community. Our minimum staffing plan, I just want to tell you that with the additional of the 5 full-time firefighter EMTs, what we will do with those positions, we'll start adding those into the busier stations to try to increase the number of people on duty at Company 3 and Company 5, but you also see that Company 1 would get one of those people, and maybe Company 4 also, because we hope to make some promotions in the midst of this this next budget to have some more supervision and lieutenants as well. The idea would be that dropping in the third firefighter on shifts. If the ambulance went out the door with 2 people on it, then one gets to stay back. Could be the driver for the fire engine that gets the fire engine out the door with other staffing available in the building. A continuation of the reduction of response times, and just overall increased resource availability. You know, it's not ideal under any circumstances for a fire engine to respond out with 1 or 2 people on it. We do it. We do what we have to do to get the job done. But having a crew of 3 go out the door is certainly something that we strive for, trying to get all crews up to 3 and eventually, in the long term, up to 5 per shift. I want to also tell you that I know the West Creek Fire Station, there's been some discussion about that over the last year or so, and it's got pushed out just a short ways into the future. I think it's FY26. And I want to thank you for, while we totally understand why that's necessary, thank you for committing to the personnel that go in that fire station and the equipment and giving us those resources even before the brick and mortar exists. And our staffing plan going out through FY25 includes those positions that will eventually be moved or reassigned to the West Creek Fire Station. So I just want to thank you for that and let you know that we can still address that staffing in the east end of the county, running out more personnel out of Company 1 and 3. The part-time plans review assistant fire marshal position, I kind of go back to the slide we spent a lot of time on, and I just want to tell you that this position will be shared with buildings inspections. In fact, possibly could reside in Mr. Fisher's department, reviewing plans, and when plans are light, we would be able to come out into the field and assist Fire Marshal Davies with those inspections in the field, whether it's a public fire safety education program or inspection or some type of engineering work. Some of the additional benefits of the increased staff, and I just want to point out a couple of things. We've noticed that since we staffed all 6 fire stations, we're not seeing nearly the number of times that we go what we refer to as NUA, where there are no units available. And pretty much what that means is that all units would be busy on a call, and there's not another unit in a holding pattern to go to the next call. And during times when we were in NUA, we tone county-wide. Our volunteer members respond in. We make up crews kind of on the fly, and we also involve our mutual aid partners who come in and help us. And that hasn't happened nearly as much since October. But I do want to tell you, just give you some numbers here. cite some NFPA figures just to give you some idea. NFPA Standard 1710, Guidelines for Organizational and Deployment of Fire Suppression, and so forth. A single-family dwelling could take as many as 14 members. And if you have a piece of aerial apparatus involved, it could be take as many as 15 members to be able to safely extinguish that fire and to do it in a very efficient manner. If you look down that list, a strip mall is 27, and I'll probably jump down to the apartments because we do have two large sets of apartments in the county now that we are focusing on, and we're looking at those very carefully. It could take as many as 27 members and 28 if you have aerial devices in use. But there's one thing about Goochland County that I want to tell you that this slide does not take into account of. And those two pictures on that slide are from Goochland County, is we don't have a fire hydrant on every corner. And so from a rural water supply standpoint, our rural water supply operations could become as big or more labor intensive than the group that's actually doing the fire extinguishment. And so when you have to shuttle and haul your water in from dry hydrants and fire hydrants and lakes and ponds, it requires more people. So the slide is a little misleading, but I just wanted to put that up there just to show you how the increased staffing is helping us. So if we could, I'd like to spend just a little bit of time on this because I want to fully explain this to the best of my ability, and our staff here can help with this as well. I know we had some questions in the board meeting earlier in the month, but some of our current staffing challenges, it's not just volunteer, it's career also. It's both types of our workforce. We had 4 career members who left and wanted to work in the larger, more urban metro fire departments. And it's not our salary. Our salaries are very competitive and benchmarked and extremely good. But sometimes these people want those other opportunities that we can't offer, such as specialty teams. They want to be on the technical rescue team or other things that these departments bring for more calls. The other thing I wanted to tell you is that there was a decrease in rescue and fire duty hours that we noted in 2019 as compared to 2018. I do want to call your attention, though, right to the bottom of the slide first, and just say that I don't want anyone to get the impression from this discussion that our volunteer members are not making a significant contribution, because I know we all know they are, with 23,000 rescue duty hours and 35,000 fire duty hours. You know, we looked at this and we'd already kind of discussed that the call volume was relatively the same, or kind of represents a 1.17% increase compared to what we saw in calendar year 2018. And we looked at that call volume and we went back to some of the reasons that the call volume might have been nearly the same. And we mentioned earlier there weren't any snowstorms, no major thunderstorms, or tropical depressions, and we upstaff our stations when those events occur. And if you think back to 2019, we accumulated hundreds of duty hours when fire stations were staffing around the clock with volunteer personnel for 3 and 4 days at a time. And we just didn't see that in 2019. Now, I'll tell you, Mr. Lumpkins, I had mentioned at the earlier meeting in February that this was only one snapshot of the overall activity. So what I did is I went back to 2018 because the numbers are still being crunched for 2019. And I told you that some volunteers aren't interested in logging duty hours. They respond from home, they live here, it's the way we've always operated, and instead they count calls. And so I wanted to give you some idea about that, and I'm going to use the 2018 numbers, and then we'll have the others soon. In 2018, there were 3,250 calls. We had 150 volunteers who were eligible as active members to go to calls. If I took the number of calls each of those volunteers answered, and it came up to 6,636 individual responses. And then if you do the average over 150 members, it's about 44 calls per member is what it averages out to. And I can tell you that you will see people who live in the community that respond from home. That's the way they account for their activity. We have a policy on file, Deputy Chief Gordon is all too familiar with, where we require 15% of the calls, response to calls that occur in that fire station's district. They have to attend so many meetings and they have to attend their training. And so it's another way of accounting, and we probably haven't done a very good job of showing that in comparison to the duty hours. But we're still looking at the duty hours because they're down, and we get that. And I'll cover that a little bit more on the next one. We recruit members. We recruit a lot of different ways, word of mouth. People go on the website and want to join. Deputy Chief Gord manages their recruitment and their application process. We had approximately 34 new members come in the door in 2019. And some of them, most of them by far, were active members. There were a couple of associate members, and then we have auxiliary members. And our auxiliaries, I don't think, get the credit they deserve because we're not showing their hours like we're showing our active members, but our auxiliary members do put in countless hours of fundraising to raise the money needed for the companies. There were 21 member resignations. And, you know, we looked at that and we said that's a lot to go out the door. But then when you look at what's going on around us and you look at national averages, and we did some research to the Virginia Office of EMS, you know, we find that it's about a 5-year window. The first couple of years, someone's being recruited, they're in training, they're excited, they're running calls for 2 years, and then when you get to that year 5, other things start to come into play. And that's just the national trend. And I'm not going to say we can't do anything about it, because we can. It's just something that one of the challenges we have to know going into it. But some of the reasons that we've lost members or things have changed, some of the members, their availability hours are down just because their availability changes. When I was looking at the numbers, that I gave you 44 average calls per member a while ago, our top 2 call runners in 2018 who ran over 200 calls apiece went to college. And they come back and they still run, but they also are volunteering, and we're proud of them because they're volunteering for volunteer fire departments at college too. So that's something. We actually hired 2 of our volunteers, and sometimes that happens. But also several other volunteers were hired by other regional fire departments. We see more members participating in fire duty hours than they do EMS. And I thought about that in case you asked me, well, why is that the case? And I think it's because EMS is probably not as attractive in some ways and also more regulated. Fire, on the other hand, there's a lot of, a lot of things about fire that attracts young members to want to be a firefighter, so forth. And, you know, it's more flexible. It's more flexible in the staffing and the duty hours. But make no mistake about it, our EMS volunteers are spot on, and they do a wonderful, wonderful job. Their life-work balance changes. People get married, they get engaged, they have children, and that can change it very quickly. The average age of member that we have is about 38 years old, which I thought was pretty good because you know, I was wondering if it wasn't a little bit higher than that, just in some respects. I will tell you, I will just call your attention to the picture there on the screen. That is Sam Bailey and Irv Spivak. Irv has put in 22 years, and Sam has also put in 22 years in the fire rescue department. And they once drove the ambulance, provided EMS care, and as they've gotten older, they found new jobs in the fire rescue department. And so now they help at their individual fire companies, but every Tuesday, today was no different. One or the other is here. If the other one is not delivering Meals on Wheels, he's running our mail for us. He runs the mail between all the fire stations or goes into Richmond or picking up equipment at our different vendors. And then, of course, we have leave of absences where some are educational leave, some are on medical leave, and then we have, you know, personal leave of absence. And I would like to just kind of pause there just to see if that helps any. It might be something that y'all thought of that I hadn't thought of, or the team could help answer. Okay, I'll keep rolling. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we're going to keep trying. We're going to recruit just like we always have. We are presently looking at our application process. Some have told us that it's a little long, a little lengthy, but you know what? We've got to do the background checks. We've got to make sure, considering the work we do, we have to make sure we have the right people doing that work. In addition, we would like to optimize the members that we presently have And we're going to take a look at our membership requirements. Maybe they're too stringent. Maybe we're asking too much in this day and age of 2020. What we asked for in the 90s should be different today. And so we're going to look at that, and we're going to see if we need to reclassify, open up some new ways for people to volunteer. We're also going to keep working hard to make sure the training that's required is local. We'll do as much of it as we can at the Henley Fire Rescue Training Center. It's a busy place, as you've already seen. But on the other hand, we'll still support our volunteers and our career members to go outside the jurisdiction to get the latest information and bring it back. In addition to that, after we take a look at our membership classifications, then we're going to take a look and see what other incentives could be available. And we'll come back to you and let you know what they are possibly in the next budget process a year from now. But we think there's some opportunities there. We just want to make sure that we think those out clearly and that we align those with our membership categories, and including auxiliary, Ms. Lascalette, because I'll just say again, our auxiliaries don't get enough credit for what they do. We think the new scheduling software, while it's a little bit new now and people aren't embracing it as quick as we wanted them to, we're going to do some more training on that. We think that might help a little bit too. And honestly, we might need to look at some type of recruiter position in future years. I'm not talking about this year or next year, but looking down the road, because we have equal the challenge getting career applicants as we do getting volunteers. And I think we could, if we had somebody that was in even a part-time capacity looking at that, we could make some headway in that area. Our emergency planning grants, I'll pick up my pace a little bit. The emergency planning grants are pretty standard each year. One comes to us from VDEM, the local emergency planning grant. It's about $33,000. It's a match with the locality. The 4 for Life comes from the Virginia Office of EMS. It's funded from the vehicle registration sold in the locality. It's about $26,000. And then we have our ATL, Aid to Localities, that comes from the Department of Fire Programs, that's funded out of the homeowners insurance industry, and that gives us about roughly $80,000. In addition to that, we are applying for grants. We're applying for an ambulance grant. We did get a grant for an ambulance last year. We got grants for the nasal naloxone, and we are trying to get another grant for diesel exhaust extraction systems in the county for our fire stations that don't have them. Emergency management is an area that we've really tried to do well in this past year. We did our regional disaster preparedness workshop day. We formed a community animal response team, kind of revitalized the Goochland amateur radio team, and we also have personnel that's part of the large animal rescue team. The most likely threats are severe weather, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, wildfires, and hazardous materials incidents, and we are focusing on that. I want to thank you for the generous CIP that you've allowed us to propose, and I know that's been covered up to this point, and we're excited to think that the ladder truck may be a possibility, an ambulance, power stretchers, staff cars, and another allotment of hydraulic rescue tools. This isn't the exact tanker that's coming to Goochland, but it is one that's very similar to it. The tanker is on order. It will carry 2,500 gallons of water. It's a 1,250 gallon a minute pump, and we plan to put it at Fire Station 5. So the east end of the county, with all the growth and development in the east end of the county, we are looking to purchase a new piece of fire aerial apparatus. We're looking at a 100-foot platform unit. We refer to the unit as a quint because it carries, it has a pump, water, it'll have hose, it'll have a complement of ground ladders, as well as the aerial device. We are in talks presently with a fire apparatus vendor. I spoke to him yesterday, and I'm looking to hear from him soon about where we can be in that process and how soon we can get that in here after we order it. There are 5-story buildings in the east end of the county. One of the set of apartments are 5 stories, as well as the new hotel, and so we certainly need that capability in the east end, and I know you know we do. Future outlook and challenges. We know with the increasing call volume, future diverse development in the county, the age and size of our fleet, unit replacement, the repairs it takes to maintain the fleet, resident expectations, training demands are always increasing. And then you get into some of the health and safety initiatives. And I'll tell you that I've told you before that firefighters are more susceptible to cancer because of the elements that they're exposed to in smoke and in fires. And another thing that we're worried about is public safety and mental health. We're seeing an increase in suicide throughout the nation of public safety providers, whether it be police, fire, or an EMS, and we're taking a look at that. I'll tell you the department is trying to develop a peer support team, a mental health peer support team, to try to provide our members more support based on some of the things that occur from stress from the job, as well as the types of things that we see on the incident. Traffic incident management, that is definitely something that we're going to stay focused on. There were eight people killed on the roadways, fire, EMS, police, and towing operators, 8 since the beginning of the year. And that's just way too many. And you probably saw in the news where Henrico and Hanover had an incident where they were on the same scene. Someone ran into the back of an Henrico fire engine. So we're focused on that. We're trying for another grant to try to get the diesel exhaust extraction systems in the fire stations. We mentioned the new volunteer incentives, we hope, the review of the existing membership requirements, implementation of SCBA, the new tanker and ambulance, aerial device. We want to start transmitting 12-lead EKGs to the hospital so the doctor has the EKG strip ahead of the ambulance arriving. And then with also the dry hydrant repairs. I just want to say that all of these projects require a lot of logistical support, and we have a logistics officer who does a really good job, and we all pitch in to try to make all these things work. Dry hydrants, we're going to continue working with our annual inspections, looking at the repairs of these. We have 6 cisterns in the county, counting the ones that are at our fire stations, and we are going to try for the Department of Forestry grants that will assist with some of these repairs. I just want to thank you, and this group of people on this slide would also say the same thing, and the many others in the field. But our department needs the training and equipment to respond to the challenges for today and tomorrow, and we appreciate your continued support. If there's any questions that you might have, I'm sorry I took a little too long, maybe. I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chief Ferguson. Do we have any questions from the board? No? Just thank you very much. Thank you, and all of our professionals
And I think,
keep us safe.
I think our volunteers and career members also, they do a wonderful job. It's easy to be on a team with such good, caring people, so.
Denny, what are those trophies for?
Well, you know, actually, I think that picture was, we actually went to a parade this past year in Louisa County, and so some of our fire apparatus brought some trophies home.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, absolutely.
Wow. So why do you need some new stuff? No, okay. All right, shouldn't have done that.
That's okay.
Yeah. Thank
Thank you.
Yeah, oh, yeah, right. All right, thank you, Chief. Mr. Clown, if you don't mind, we are going to take maybe about a 10-minute break to about 4:30, and then come back then, if you don't mind holding off a few more minutes. Thank you. On the same page. All right, you ready? Okay. All right, thank you for being patient, Mr. Clown, and present the animal protection budget. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Podesky, thank you for the opportunity to present Animal Protection's FY 2021 department budget. Principal functions of animal protection are to respond to all calls of service related to domestic animals 365 days per year, to enforce all animal welfare ordinances of Goochland County and the state of Virginia, to prevent the spread of rabies to humans and domestic animals, to maintain the Goochland Animal Shelter, to reunite lost animals with their owners, and to find permanent homes for adoptable animals. Objectives of animal protection and goals are to continue to provide public safety services while striving to reduce response times, to continue to find forever homes for all adoptable animals entering the animal shelter, to continue to reduce the number of rabies incidents in domestic animals through education, law enforcement, and providing periodic low-cost rabies clinics, and then becoming operational in the new animal shelter late spring, early summer. Yay. So calls for service, overall calls for service have increased from year to year. From FY 2018, we had a 13% increase. And then FY 2019, we actually had a 32% increase with a total of 1,882 calls. That second group of bar graphs is for the calls per officer. If you look at FY 2018, that number did decrease due to the hiring of an additional officer. Since that time, call volumes have increased to the point that we are seeing a higher level of calls per officer as well. Animal intake increased as well. We saw an increase in the number of dogs coming into our facility from 324 to 356 in FY 2019. We did have a decrease in the number of cats, and that is to the lack of cat housing space that we had at the temporary facility. So we were having to put citizens on a waiting list to take in those cats because of that lack of space. Overall, because of the lower cat rate, there was a lower total intake of 441, which was good because, again, we were in the temporary facility. Adoption rates were down also, and this is solely due to being in the temporary facility. The location, we were glad to have that space to utilize in the interim, but we didn't get a lot of foot traffic to that location. It is anticipated that with the new animal shelter, we will increase our overall adoption rates. Although adoption rates were down, our save rate percentage was steady and remained stable. We saw a overall save rate of 90%. We saw our dog save rate at 93%, and we saw our cat save rate at 80%. A lot of this is due to the partnerships that we have with local private animal welfare organizations and the transfer of animals to those facilities. Enforcement actions. We did see an increase of our notice to complies, which a notice to comply is a written warning that we issue to animal owners for infractions of the Goochland and state animal welfare ordinances. We strive to gain compliance for these infractions through the notice to comply and not have to issue summons or warrants to court. But we did issue a combination of 43 summons and warrants in FY 2019. So the overall proposed budget for FY 2021 is $590,354. As you can see, there was a slight decrease in operational costs. This is due to the transfer of electrical, water, sewer, and janitorial supplies to the general fund budget. We did increase other line items of the operational costs, and that is due to opening or moving into the new animal shelter. There was a slight increase in personnel costs due to annual salary and benefit cost increases. Future outlook. With an increase in residential growth, there's an expected increase in domestic animal populations. Citizens have an increased expectation of compliance with and enforcement of local animal ordinances. There's an anticipated increase in animal intake at the new animal shelter with additional space and improved conditions. And then staffing, coordinating, and operating the new shelter and adoption center will be a challenge. We have a good plan in place, and we're looking forward to that challenge. And I will be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you very much. Board, questions or comments? Okay, Mr. Lumpkins.
I can't get my electronic version of the budget to come up, so I'm having a hard time finding what page. 131.
131.
Thank you. Mr. Officer Clark, did you say that you, when did you add another officer? 2 years ago, a year or 2 years ago?
2 years ago.
There we go, okay. Or wait a second. So that was FY 2018?
Yes, sir.
Okay. when was the last time before that that you, was staffing, how long before that was your staffing level?
Yes, sir. I don't know the exact year. I believe it would have been 2016 that we added the fourth officer.
Okay.
But I can get you the exact date or year.
I'm just trying to get a sense, are we keeping up with, yeah, I saw, the increased calls and others,
Yes, sir.
and I see you've requested one, but the proposal is not at this time. And that one request would be for another officer?
That's correct. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Peterson?
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you. Thank you, Officer Clow. Just to follow on that question about the calls per officer, so we noticed that somewhat of an increase. You have, this year, we added 2 part-time, is that,
2 part-time shelter attendants, and that
so they don't run calls?
they do not.
Okay.
No. And that was not an addition. I want to clarify that a little bit.
Okay.
They were added last year.
Yes.
We postponed hiring the positions because of not moving into the animal shelter at the
Okay.
time that we expected. So that, it's not an additional for 2021.
Yes, understand, great, thank you.
Mr. Spoonhour?
Yeah, just to follow up on the same kind of line. I see that you requested a person, but then they're proposing not hiring that person. Can you give us a little context of what we're leaving on the table, so to speak?
I can. We feel that the additional officer would assist in meeting the expectations of the citizens and potentially reducing response times dependent on the type of calls that are coming in. And it also would allow supervisors to focus more on administrative duties.
All right, thanks, sir. Anyone else? Mr. Lumpkins?
Real quick follow-up. And this is anecdotal, and I certainly don't make decisions based on anecdotal, but I had a friend of mine that lives in the center of the county who was bitten by a dog in the eastern part of the county not that long ago. And the way he described it, when he would phone call, he had to leave a message. Is that normal operating procedure to leave a message and have an officer call you back, or how do y'all communicate with the public?
It can be. So a majority of the calls do come directly to our office. We try to have staff at that phone to answer those calls, but if call peaks are high, then that staff is out on the road answering calls. Some calls do come in through our dispatch center and are dispatched to us from communications. But there are times where they receive the answer machine. The way the system's set up, when someone leaves a message, it emails the officers on duty, so we get that message pretty quickly. As long as we can clear up the call that we're on, we have a pretty quick response into calling that person back.
Gotcha. So it's a mixed bag of whether somebody calls the police, sheriff's office and it gets routed to you, or you all have another number that people can call directly to your office that goes through what you're describing?
We do. We have an officer's extension line that goes directly to our office, but there is a mixed bag of just the individual may call our office or they may call dispatch.
Gotcha. All right, thank you for that.
Okay. Mr. Peterson?
Yeah, Madam Chair, thanks. I have just another question real quick. I noticed the increase in calls. Calls are not homogeneous. I guess there's a variety of different types of calls you can run.
That's right.
Vehicle strike, VDOT gets involved with the vehicle strike calls, is that right? Or is that something that falls into your purview? If
Investigate
a deer
the
strike?
the initial strike falls under us, and then VDOT may assist with that. So
Okay.
That's correct.
So the variety of different calls.
There is.
We heard from Chief Ferguson that they undertake an awful lot of efforts to try to not run calls, like prevent fires and prevent disasters. And do you have similar type programs to try to reduce your call volume through either education, training?
We do. I'm fortunate to be able to teach a session of the Sheriff's Citizens Academy each year. We go into the school systems and do classes for up-and-coming youth about the importance of rabies vaccines, dog safety. We do summer camps during the summer with kids. And we do have 2 rabies clinics each year where we try to get those animals vaccinated so that we don't have the potential for domestic outbreaks and rabies too.
Okay, good. I just, if there's a ways to prevent calls that are preventable, if you will.
Sure.
I'm glad to hear that you have programs like that as well, because I know we do on fire rescue. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Mr. Spoonhammer.
I would love to see, I guess just having been watching just recently, you're not going to find much more hysterical folks than when their pet gets lost and they're calling and they need you there. So I'd be interested in seeing if you could pull some numbers together of what do you think and the increased person would do to response times? Like how much would it help and how many of these calls do you get? Just because I see it, they get really emotional when their pets are lost. And I know you guys do a great job of finding them.
Sure.
Great, thank you.
Just
All right.
to follow on, no, just to follow on that, we
Put a GPS on them, right?
we heard the Sheriff Creasy talk about Lifesaver for people. I don't know if there's a parallel program for saving other family members like dogs and cats. Is there a program like that out there where you can save your time and energy by tracking it right away and know where it is? And, is there?
Well, there is. If each citizen had their license on their dog, it would probably put me out of business pretty quickly. But we do have computer systems in our truck, so if we pick up your pet and it has the county license, we can pull your information up immediately, and it's a free ride home program. We're going to bring the dog right to your front door and return it to you.
That's great when you have already found the animal.
Right.
When the animal's in the wild. Are there programs like that where owners can participate voluntarily if they want to be able to locate their pet more quickly? Is that?
Sure. I mean, we keep reports of all lost and found pets within the county, and that's through our social media, through the phone system, and they can contact us and we can assist them with trying to locate their pets.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, anything else? Well, good. Well, thank you very much. We
Thank you.
appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next item is Ms. Parrish, specifically of the workforce report. Let's see, now where is that in the budget?
You should have a separate hard copy
Oh,
of
you do.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board, Mr. Budesky. I'm Kelly Parrish, Director of Human Resources, and I wish to thank you for the opportunity to present the HR Workforce Report. Today I'll be going over workforce statistics, benefits, compensation, position change requests, and the proposed budget. Let's start with some statistics. As of 12/31/19, we had a total of 222 full-time employees and 29 part-time employees, for a total workforce of 251. This slide breaks it down between county and the constitutional staff. Average salary of our workforce is $56,866. Average age is 43. Average years of service is 6.5. We have 162 males and 89 females, and our minority rate is 11.1%. We'd like to see a more diverse workforce and have partnered with minority recruitment agencies as well as with the school system to create a diversity task force. Our efforts are helping, as you will see in this next slide. In calendar year 2019, we posted 29 jobs. This does not include the sheriff's office since they do their own recruiting. Out of these 29, we received 670 applications. From those, 31.8% were minority applicants compared to 16% in 2017. So our targeted recruitment efforts are helping. We hired 54 new employees, and this includes multiple hires from Parks and Recreation and Fire, and this does include the Sheriff's Office staff since we do their new hire processing. Let's see, these new hires represent 25% of minorities, up from 17% 6.7% in 2018. So we are making progress and will continue our efforts in this area. The county had 39 separations in calendar year 19. 22 were full-time employees and 17 were part-time employees. Separation reasons are listed there, but I will note that out of the 23 people who left for other jobs, they mostly represented the part-time staff. We had a 15.5% turnover rate for 2019. This included all the above positions, meaning both full-time and part-time staff. This next slide compares the turnover rates to our other localities. And these figures do not include part-time turnover, except for Albemarle. So therefore, our turnover rate dropped to 9.9%, putting us in good shape with the other localities. Let's talk about benefits. 193 of our employees, or 87% of our workforce, are enrolled in our health insurance plan. And Mr. Budesky stole my thunder here because I was hoping I'd be able to tell you the good news that we have no increase for our health insurance premiums for the next fiscal year. Yay! Okay, that brings us to retiree health insurance. In 2011, employees hired on July 1st or after were cut off from access to retiree health benefits. We're recommending to now allow employees access to retiree health insurance. This would be at full cost with 5 years of service with Goochland upon VRS retirement. And I have provided you with a copy of our proposed policy change as well. The reasons for this recommendation: all of our benchmark jurisdictions provide this continuing coverage to their retirees. Our school system currently provides this benefit to their retirees as well. And so this would give parity between schools and government employees as well as with their surrounding jurisdictions. I also wanted to update you on a policy that we updated or implemented in January of 2019. We provided 8 hours of volunteer leave to our full-time employees. So in calendar year 2019, a total of 72 hours were used. There were 17 participants benefiting Goochland Christmas Mother, Goochland Animal Shelter, Goochland Community Cats, and Goochland Cares. On to employee compensation. This is a 5-year merit increase comparison with our other localities. Last year, all localities gave a 3% merit increase. There were mostly 2% the year before, with the exception of Henrico and Chesterfield, who gave a little more. This next slide shows our merit increase history over the past 10 years. Looking at national merit increases, some leading research companies reported that the actual average merit increase for 2019 was 3.1%. They're predicting the same thing for this year as well. But that doesn't necessarily reflect the trend for localities or municipalities. Local jurisdictions are projecting the following. Hanover and Powhatan are recommending a 2% increase, and Chesterfield and Henrico were undecided. So Goochland is recommending a 2% merit increase for fiscal year 21. In addition to merits, we also wish to stay competitive with compensation. So we just completed a new benchmark salary study. We received comparisons from 4 jurisdictions: Chesterfield, Hanover, Henrico, and Powhatan. Albemarle, Louisa, and New Kent were also asked to participate, but they were unable. As a result, we were asking for a 3-year total budget of $212,000, with $87,000 to be budgeted for year 1 benchmark adjustments. We're also keeping on top of potential budgetary needs that could affect fiscal year 23 and 24, when minimum wage increases might go to $13 and $15 per hour, respectively.
Before you leave that one, can you share what, we've had to, I think the board's aware there's some legislation out there that's talking about going ultimately to a $15 minimum wage, but it incrementally rolls out. there's an impact to both the county and the schools with this, and I don't have all the schools figures in particular. We'll ask Dr. Rayleigh potentially to talk about that impact at his session on March 4th, but from the county, it's not insignificant. While the initial bump is maybe tolerable, can you share what we're projecting if that actually gets adopted?
Mhm.
Kelly and her team have run the numbers just based on the employees under the minimum wage thresholds over the past, they're at least projected in the bill right now.
So what's passed the House so far is the minimum wage going to $9 per hour this July 1st, and then the next year going to $11, and then the following year to $13, and then the final year to $15. So it's minimal impact to us this year because most all of our employees are already making $9 per hour. The only change would be to our seasonal or recreational aid staff who come in and work during the summer for Parks and Recreation. So we'd have to bring them up, but everyone else minimal. Actually, until you get to 2022, bringing employees up to $13 per hour. It's projected approximately $71,000 increase. And then in 2023, we're looking at having to bring everyone up to $15 hourly, about $127,000 increase, just to give you some ballparks.
I'm sorry, what that doesn't, and we haven't done a full study on potential compression impacts. And so it could be more than that by the time we actually take a bigger look at that.
Since you're stopped at this point, do you mind if I ask you a question about the slide? Normally I would hold it till the end. Would you rather I did that?
Doesn't matter to me.
Okay. So, the benchmark comparison, Chesterfield, Hanover, Henrico, and Powhatan, and you had mentioned something about Louise, and I didn't quite catch it, but 3 of these counties are nothing like Goochland.
Correct. Yes, we took that into consideration. Yes, we had also asked some smaller localities who had participated in the past, Albemarle, Louisa, and New Kent, but they just didn't have the staff to participate this year.
Ms. Lushler and the rest of the board, we're glad to share more with you in the 2x2 about the process. We had to put in a factor because we didn't have as many participating
Right.
agencies as we did the last benchmark, and so we're glad to get into more of a dive on that.
Okay, that's fine. Just since we were stopped. So,
Sure.
sorry. All right, go ahead, Ms. Parrish. Thank you very much.
Okay, on to fiscal year 21 staffing requests and recommendations. There are 5 part-time positions being requested for fiscal year 21 and 21 full-time positions being requested. It's the county administration's recommendation to fund 3 part-time positions and 13 full-time positions for a total of 16 positions recommended for funding. And I will go over these in further detail in just a moment. First, let's look at the 5-year staffing requests. There are 8 part-time positions being requested over the next 5 years, and there are 71 full-time positions being requested for a total of 79 staffing requests over the next 5 years. Going back to fiscal year 21 positions, there are 11 new positions recommended in public safety. So just to reiterate what Mr. Budesky had said earlier, there are 5 firefighters, 4 deputies, 1 dispatcher, and 1 part-time plans review assistant fire marshal. In addition, there are 5 other positions being recommended: a part-time administrative assistant, a full-time GIS technician, a part-time convenience center attendant, a full-time custodian, and a full-time customer service specialist. There are, however, 10 positions not being recommended for funding, and they are listed here on the slide.
Kelly, before you move on, certainly during the other presentations, you're encouraged to ask and talk about, just as we talked to Mr. Clough about the impacts to animal protection. I ask every department to tell me what they believe their full needs are. Right. That does not mean that I always have the ability to accommodate every request. So I think it's important for us to make sure you know what the departments believed were their additional needs. some point, our job is to recommend a balanced budget that can't always accommodate all of the needs. Our hope is in this process is the board gut checks the staff's, county administrator's recommended budget, and if we need to make amendments, the budget process allows for some of that. So you've heard some of the requests tonight between sheriff and animal protection. You will hear more of these as you go through the full budget process for thoughts and perspectives on as well.
So to recap the recommendations, there are 13 new full-time positions and 3 new part-time positions, totaling 904,792, a 2% merit increase at 296,653, benchmark adjustments at 87,000, for a total just under 1.3 million, including benefit costs. And this is further broken down between general fund and utilities. In conclusion, we believe the proposed fiscal year 21 budget demonstrates our ability to invest in our workforce and meet increased service demands. And we thank you for your continued support. I'd be happy to provide any additional data that you hadn't seen here, because I love statistics and analysis, and I'd also be happy to answer any questions that you might have at this time.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Parrish. Any questions from the board? Mr. Lumpkins?
I'll start out real quick.
Okay.
Thank you. So what, a couple of questions. Let's start. Retiree health insurance coverage, the recommended policy. What's a reason to not do this?
Unknown future costs.
Well, that's the only one I can come up with, cost, because we don't know what this cost, we don't know what this,
No.
we can't project this cost, right?
Not unless you have a crystal ball. I mean, there's some actuaries that could give you a kind of a close figure.
So
but
our insurance folks, they wouldn't try to touch to guess what this would cost.
no, they had a zero increase for us when I asked them how this would impact us. Zero increase to our expenses or our premiums for this year.
Thank you.
Considering also, let me just point out that the school system already does it and offers their employees, and they have 65% more employees than we do participating in the health insurance plan.
And they haven't experienced a cost change or
Same as ours.
well, because we're all together.
Correct.
All together.
Okay.
But how much are they impacting?
All right.
Is the question.
Thank you. I looked at the merit increase slides, and your last slide talked about, you gave a breakdown of a merit component and then a benchmark component. What's the definition of a merit increase?
Well, what we wish it to be and what it truly is today are two separate things. Would like it to be solely on merit, and when we do have higher merit increases, we can do that for higher performers. But right now, it's pretty much a cost of living adjustment.
Thank you.
Can I add to that, please? Every employee is evaluated annually, and if they don't achieve satisfactory evaluations, they do not get the merit.
Correct.
So while it's at 2% and the majority of our employees achieve it, there are employees that do not each year based on their lack of performance. I said this, it's a fair question because I think merits and COLAs do get mixed up,
Right.
especially when a lot of people get it. I think in a smaller jurisdiction, if you are not performing, we catch you before we have to determine if you deserve a merit increase or not. And so most of our employees that are, you know, if there's a handful at the end of the year that don't qualify, they're not shocked that they're not qualifying. We've addressed their performance issues most often before it gets to that point. And when you get to basically a 2% for your merit amount, you're just keeping up. It's not as much of a pay incentive merit as some of the other jurisdictions do. And so some of that weighs into that whole overall factor with the merit piece.
For the budget numbers we're looking at, the merit increase calculations you're giving us, is that based on 100% merit across the board, 100% increases, the dollar figure?
Yes.
Okay. That's all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Sharp?
At what threshold in the VRS do you qualify for retirement benefits?
That's a really great question because they have 3 plans now. You have Plan 1, Plan 2, and Plan 3. Plan 1 employees are eligible at 50 years, 50 years of age, but Plan 2 and 3 aren't eligible until age 60.
Okay, but at how many years? I mean, you're saying at 5 years of employment, recommending that health insurance be available at 5 years of employment. How does that, I'm curious as how that tracks with what the state considers retirement, because most people don't consider working for 5 years to be a retirement age.
Right. It's the minimum. If you are age 65 with 5 years of service, you can retire with full benefits. So it's a criteria for VRS retirement with 5 years. That's the least amount.
Okay.
That accounts, for instance, for someone like myself or who's been at a different locality, and I've been earning VRS years, but that 5 years applies to with Goochland.
Yeah.
So you may have other years eligible for VRS retirement, but you have to have been in Goochland for 5 years
Right.
prior to your retirement.
But if somebody came in and got a job and decided to retire in 5 years, seems awfully generous to.
But we also looked at the figures, and unfortunately, quite frankly and sadly, the majority of retirees would not be able to afford the full cost premiums until age 65. Currently, we only have 5 early retirees on our plan. That's it. So we're not talking huge numbers here.
Can I just, the other thing, I mean, part of the reason we got comfortable with this is, just keep in mind, it's not that we're giving you insurance, we're allowing you to pay at the full premium to stay on our plan, which right now is about $1,000. And so I think that's why we've seen lower participation rates. Some people, even on private markets, can potentially beat that and haven't decided, based on our experience, to even join. There was, and we haven't removed this in our recommendation, she'd mentioned the Plan 1 people and the people before 2011. Goochland used to actually give those individuals a stipend to offset that cost. That stopped back in 2011. And everyone hired after that wasn't eligible. But I think a lot of the programs that people think about are more along those lines of that the county's actually either contributing or reducing the cost to. This is just proposing that they have the ability to participate at full cost. So it's maybe you were clear on that. I'll be honest with you, I was confused when we started looking at this initially to make sure I understood exactly what it was we were proposing and the risk we were proposing to the county as well.
If you don't mind, while we're on this subject, just to follow up, they pay for the insurance premiums, but their experience goes into our overall record.
Correct.
Okay, that's where our exposure is, right there. Thank you. All right, any other questions? No? I do have one more. So as the county staff grows, and we've seen this in the past, and I've seen it lately, is a comparison, population, the inflation. I mean, where are we? Are we growing faster than the economy, the same as the economy? I'd like to see that comparison. Like I said, I saw it maybe 2 years ago, but maybe if we could get that updated.
Okay,
Ms.
sure.
Leslie, it's actually in my earlier presentation.
Okay,
If you'd like a different chart, we're glad to
Okay.
assist you with it. But we tried to hit the overall county budget cost, which includes our personnel versus CPI and population.
maybe I wasn't paying attention, huh?
I wowed you so much. But if that's not what you're looking for, we're glad to help you.
All right, I have to, okay, but, all right. That's the one, okay, thank you. No other questions? All right, Ms. Parrish, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so next we have, a presentation by Ms. Barbara Horlacher on the issue of requesting to set a public hearing for April 7th.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, members of the board. I don't have much of a presentation. I'm here to ask you for the public hearing authorization. Per the state code, we have to,
Sorry.
that's okay. We have to ask for authorization to advertise and hold public hearings on 3 different topics, and we have to do that within a timely manner. So in order to meet our advertising requirements, we need to get that authorization tonight. We have a public hearing at 6 PM on April 7th here in the boardroom. And there will be, the first public hearing will be on the real property tax rate. And that is the first, that's where we advertise the effective tax rate and also the, advertise the tax rate that you intend to enact in this budget. You always have the prerogative to lower that tax rate, but you can't increase it above the tax rate of 53 cents. And does anybody have any questions on that authorization?
Madam Chair, I move that the Board of Supervisors authorize staff to advertise the notice in 5.3A of our packet for public hearing on April 7th, 2020 at 6 PM on the proposed real property tax increase. And that word increase, of course, is based on the increase in assessment. The rate is noted at 53 cents in the ad.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any other questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No, motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Holaker. However, I do have one question. On the notice that goes out, the notice of proposed real estate tax increase, it's on page 8 of our packet. The difference between the lower tax rate and proposed would be 3 cents per 100 or 6.0%. Does that math come out right? I think I had a little less than that.
There's, the 2 percentages are different, and I know that's confusing sometimes.
Okay.
But it's, well, first of all, I had to round the cents because I think it really came out to 50.5 cents, so that can be part of it. Also, what you're comparing to is you're comparing this year's reassessed values versus last year's total value. And
Okay.
so the math doesn't, I'd be glad to show you the calculation sometime,
but
but
you- okay.
the math doesn't always work out exactly.
Okay, thank you. That's all I need to know. All right, so the next issue.
Okay, so next public hearing will be on ordinance changes. And the ordinance changes that we are going to advertise for are the fee schedules, which is Appendix C to the county code. Reduction in the fee for vacation of plat by ordinance. We're doing that to match the state code. We showed you some of the new building inspection fees, and we'll talk about those more later. And also to increase the water and sewer rates. So this would be the advertisement for the public hearing to be held on April 7th. And if there are any questions about that?
Any questions? Do we have a motion?
I did have a question. You said you'll talk about that later. Is that just in a
I mean, we're talking about what we're asking you to do. Sometimes with this, we kind of have to put the cart before the horse. So we're asking you to authorize the advertisement of this, but we will get into more detail on why we're doing the 5% and 6% increases and some of the other changes as
So this
in
is just
further
for the publication of the
presentations.
notice.
Yeah.
Just to set the hearing, right. So,
Madam Chair, I move that the board set a public hearing on April 7th, 2020. I believe that would be at 6 PM, right?
6 PM, yes.
To consider the proposed ordinance amendment, the summary of which is on page 5.4 of our packet today, and with the ordinance draft at 5.4 of our packet. And 5.4 and following along with the fee schedule, Appendix C.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion passes. Ms. Harlacher, one more.
All right.
You're on a roll.
The third public hearing that we have to have and advertise for, as required by the state, is a synopsis of our budget, which you see also in your packet. It contains the county administrator's proposed budget, the school's budget, the FY '21 to '45 CIP, and all tax rates. So that would be all our personal property tax rates, our TCSD rate, and all other tax rates. So if you have any questions on that, that will be advertised.
Madam Chair, I move that the board approve and authorize staff to advertise the schedule of budgets and tax rates for a public hearing on April 7th, 2020 at 6 p.m. And the attached is found at the start of section 5.5 of our agenda today. And the last pages in 5.5A.
Okay, so we have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. No additional questions. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion passes.
Thank you.
So, before we adjourn, Mr. Budesky had a few final comments on the budget process, I believe.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just for the newest board members, thank you. You just survived your first budget session.
It wasn't so bad.
And so this is just the beginning. But I guess the question is always out there of, okay, we just heard the presentations, now what? And so this, at the end of each budget session, we either pause and say, I'd like to revisit this issue or that issue. If not here, and something comes up later, please email it to myself, and I'm glad to track that as an issue to follow up on. We will catch up in your 2x2s coming up, and then at the end of each subsequent budget session, we can go back. So we'll be tracking that list of outstanding items that need revisited, more time, more information. There were some I've already got on the list from questions that came up earlier, but this is the process that we will use to track and then try to close those loops as we go throughout the budget, as we move closer to that April timeframe. Anything that we change or talk about amending from my introduced will be included in an amendment section at our April board meeting, and then will be included in the April public hearings as well. So there is plenty of opportunity for additional insight and feedback, but we just want to make sure that, just because a question may not have come up during the core of the presentation, there are opportunities to bring those things up.
Mr. Budesky, if you don't mind, you had said, and I know that we do post the budget, the proposed budget, and then, of course, the adopted, when it is adopted, we post that online, but we received a lot of information today via handouts and PowerPoint presentations. Will these be also available?
Yes, ma'am. I believe
Because there's really some great stuff in here.
we will post them all.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Okay, any other business to come before the board? All right, therefore, we will adjourn to Tuesday, February 25th, 2 p.m. for a budget session. Wednesday, March 4th, 2 p.m., regular meeting. That's Wednesday, a different day and a different time. And also 6 p.m. that day, so 2 and 6 on the 4th. Tuesday, March 10th, 2 p.m. for a budget work session. Tuesday, April 7th for our regular meeting, and 6 p.m. That's a regular meeting day. And then Tuesday, April 21st, hopefully, with any kind of luck, we will be approving our budget that day, and that is at 2 p.m. So hearing no other business, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.